Aye. Hello?
Can hear you.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Okay, just wanted to be sure. I'm driving and I wanted to make sure that I was on.
You're not on. That was a joke.
Oh,
Good. We're good.
thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Post Commissioners meeting. And there are several of us who are here in West Sacramento and several of us who are on Zoom. There's an echo. Okay, is that better? Wonderful. If I can now direct everyone's attention to the Post staff for our call to order.
Thank you. Barcelona,
Here.
Ron,
Here.
Brazil.
Here.
Please, here. Donaldin,
Here.
Doyle,
Here.
Dudley, here. Yule,
Here,
Long, McMahon,
Here.
Marsh, Moore, O'Rourke,
Here.
Ramirez. Thank you.
Thank you. Please join me for a moment of silence, honoring the officers who lost their lives in the line of duty since our last meeting. Deputy Thomas J. Albanese of the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, Officer Jose Anzora from Los Angeles Police Department, Detective Luca Benedetti of the San Luis Obispo Police Department, Officer Jimmy In from the Stockton Police Department, Sergeant Dominique Vaca of the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department. We just lost Sergeant Dominique Vaca on the 31st, and I've asked Sheriff McMahon to tell us a little bit about Sergeant Vaca. Sheriff McMahon?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sergeant Vaca was tragically murdered on Monday of this week. He's been a member of our department since 2004 and was a detective in narcotics and did an incredible job, and most recently was assigned as a sergeant to our Morongo Basin Station, which has the responsibility for the contract cities of Yucca Valley and 29 Palms. Sergeant Vaca is also a 6-year veteran of the United States Army and survived by his wife and 2 young children. He'll be remembered as a person that was a role model, specifically as a sergeant, but as a role model for those young deputies that he had the opportunity to supervise and someone that they looked up to. And I've heard so many positive comments over the last couple of days about his leadership style and commitment to this profession. And this senseless murder was just a tragedy, not only for the Morongo Basin Station and our department, but our entire profession. He lived his life honorably, and he definitely will be missed. A short little summary of the event is that deputies in the Morongo Basin area were doing some additional off-highway vehicle enforcement. A deputy attempted to stop a street motorcycle without a license plate. A pursuit ensued, and they lost the motorcycle several times during the pursuit. At one point, found the motorcycle laying on its side, and the rider had fled on foot. After a short foot pursuit, that suspect shot and ultimately killed Sergeant Vaca. Other deputies were able to locate the suspect after he fled from the initial scene, and he fired at those deputies as well. They returned fire and killed the suspect. Tragic. extremely tragic. But we'll all remember him as someone that we all could look up to. And services are pending. I met with the family already today, and we're working on services and the rest of the needs that we need to meet for the family. So thank you for giving me that opportunity, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Sheriff. And would you all join me in a moment of silence for all of those officers? Thank you. I'm also going to do something that we haven't done before. This has been a particularly tragic week for first responders. Yesterday, we lost a firefighter. Another firefighter came into a station in Los Angeles, and he killed Los Angeles County firefighter specialist, Tori Carlone. Another captain at the fire department was also injured and was in surgery. I mentioned this after we've recognized the law enforcement officers who died during duty because this was a firefighter who also died. And we often talk about our brothers and sisters in first responders. And so the tragedies continue. And every time a public servant, but specifically a first responder, is injured, it affects us all. So I just wanted to take this moment to honor all firefighters and their families, but specifically today, LA County Firefighter Specialist Tony Carlone. Thank you all very much. And now roll call, please. Okay, we did the roll call at the beginning. So now I'd like to introduce Post Advisory Committee Chair, our Post Legal Counsel and Executive Director. So across from me is Randy Waltz, Post Advisory Committee Chair. And to my right is Post Legal Counsel William Toby Darden. And to my left is Post Executive Director Manny Alvarez. At this time, I'm also going to allow for public comment. This is a time set aside for members of the public to comment on items on the commission agenda. Pursuant to the commission policy, the commission chair will manage the public comment period in deference to the commission's workload and meeting time constraints. Up to 15 minutes is allotted at the beginning of each commission meeting for public comments on items on the agenda. Based on recent events, more people than usual may want to address the commission. Therefore, if required, we will go longer than the 15 minutes allotted, but may limit that period to no more than 1 hour as we have many topics to cover on the agenda. Members of the public who wish to speak are asked to limit their remarks to no more than 5 minutes. If we have many people who wish to speak on the same topic, I, as the chair, may intervene and will ask you to limit your remarks to no more than 1 minute. Pursuant to existing commission policy, the chair may conclude public comment period if multiple speakers are voicing repetitive or similar statements and the 15-minute public comment period has expired. Please be advised that the commission cannot take action on items not on the agenda. Also, please remember that this meeting is being transcribed, so I may politely interrupt and ask you to repeat or speak slowly and clearly so that your comment can be correctly captured in the transcript. Now, if there is anyone watching who would like to address the commission during public comment, please call into the number shown on the screen at this time. We will take calls on a first come, first served basis. If other persons are in the queue waiting to speak, you will be placed on hold until it is your turn to address the commission. You will also know when it is your turn to speak when you hear that you are unmuted. Once again, you will know if it is your turn to speak when you hear the word unmuted. We will wait for approximately 1 minute to allow for individuals to call in. When it is your turn, if you wish, please state your name and organization. Let me at this time ask if there's anyone in the audience that would like to make a public comment. Seeing no one, we now turn to the phones.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon. Please go on. Can you hear me? Sir, can you hear me? I believe you're the person calling on your cell.
Hello?
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Executive Director Alvarez, and of course, the hardworking Post staff. My name is Wayne Quint Jr., and I'm the Executive Director of the Los Angeles County Professional Peace Officers Association, also known as POPA. I want to thank the Commissioners for giving me the opportunity to comment on Agenda Item D that proposes changes to the minimum training requirements for district attorney investigators. POPA is the recognized bargaining unit for sergeants and lieutenants who are employed by the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. POPA only this week became aware of the proposal to amend the training requirement for district attorney investigators to include completion of either the regular basic course or the specialized investigators basic course. This proposed change would change what I believe is a decades-old minimum training requirement that will foundationally change the hiring standards for district attorneys investigators. POPA's concern is why the change is needed, as there is uniformity, consistency, and similar training requirements throughout the state of California for district investigators. And so my respectful request is that the Commission delay a decision on the staff's recommendations until stakeholders such as POPA and other labor organizations that represent district attorney investigators are hopefully included in this proposal discussion, which deserves careful consideration through collaborative dialogue with Post and all potentially impacted stakeholders. Thank you, Commissioners, for your consideration.
Thank you so much for your call. And there appears to have been some lack of communication. I know that the executive director of Post, Manny Alvarez, reached out shortly after our October meeting to get the word out, to seek just the kind of input that you gave. So I'm sorry that it didn't get to you sooner, but all the commissioners heard you loud and clear, and we appreciate your call.
And I appreciate everything the Commission does for public safety throughout the state of California, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next call.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Please go on.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners as well. Brent Westwood, California District Attorney Investigator Association President. Wanted to reach out to you to share the same sentiment of the previous speaker. We are also interested in the same as far as a delay on this decision in regards to Agenda Item D. We're also had meetings with our group in regards to this matter. I think it's a very, very important matter, which would require further review of any potential changes that would impact all our association, as well as all the other associations within the various counties. So again, without going back into the same details, we're in support of that and would also like to delay this request or postpone it for a later date. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your call. Next, please. Can you hear me, caller? I hear some kind of sound. Is there a caller on the line? Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Please go ahead.
Hi, Captain Richard Alosi with the LADA's office, acting deputy chief, representing, basically echoing the last two speakers. Our Chief Arcos and our bureau would like to have this tabled if possible for further discussion and research. For basically get a better understanding of what this is really all about. and we would appreciate a work with next session.
Thank you.
That is, I appreciate you.
Thank you. And we appreciate your call. Next caller.
Hello, my name is Brad Ehrman.
Hello, Brad Irwin. Please go ahead.
Great. I'm calling on behalf of the Special Agents of the California Department of Justice, and I'm on the opposing view of those last couple of callers. We're in support of the change in the regulations to make special agents with the specialized posts eligible to work for the DA's office, and we were also in support of what we talked about at the last meeting is a bridge class where people with specialized posts could take some additional training to get adequate and changed over to a full basic post. So our association is in full support of these changes, and we just want to give our support to that.
Thank you for calling, Brad. And I also want to let you know, when we do discuss this later in the agenda, we will be discussing the staff's finding on that bridge course. So if you can't
Great.
stick around
Thank you
for the
very
rest
much.
of the meeting, you'll be able to see what those comments were in the published transcript.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Next caller.
Hi, this is Paul Bartlett with the Association of Orange County Deputy Sheriffs. Can you hear me?
Yes, Paul, we can. Please go ahead.
Yes, and thank you, Chair, and thank you for members of the commission for listening to us today. I'm Paul Bartlett, the Executive Director of the Association of Orange County Deputy Sheriffs. I represent not only the Deputy Sheriffs, but the DA investigators for the County of Orange. And I'll echo a little bit of what Executive Director Wayne Quint said. You know, we've recently learned of this matter. It's my understanding it was contacted through the California DA Investigators Association, but we are the actual bargaining unit and the representation unit for the DA investigators. And we're opposed to moving forward on this. We do not have much notice. We would like to have it postponed so we can learn more and have a fair shake at looking at how this impacts our people directly and our staffing, but we're opposed as the information that we have. I know our department's opposed to it with the DA's office out here. And I think that, you know, we would ask that it be postponed so that we can get more information as it moves forward before we change the minimum qualifications. It's my understanding that many years ago it was changed to this process for a particular purpose. We're looking at that as well. And I think it needs to, you know, we shouldn't be looking at making any changes until we can properly vet it out with all the stakeholders involved. And we don't feel like we've had an opportunity to be a viable partners in this proposal. So I'd ask that it be postponed as we continue to deal with different stakeholders. I'd like to thank the commission and the chair. I appreciate your time.
And thank you for your call. I just want to reiterate that shortly after the commission discussed this topic, Executive Director Manny Alvarez did reach out, but appears that there was a lack of communication within the ranks after that. And so we certainly care very much about all of your views, and the commission will be discussing it this afternoon. Thanks again for your call. Next call.
Thank you. Could I make
Please.
Could I make a comment on that?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, I know, as my understanding, it was one person that was contacted at one organization, and unfortunately that organization is not the bargaining unit. They do represent DA investigators who more or less with the department, but not directly with the bargaining unit. So unfortunately that communication didn't get to the actual bargaining units. So thank you very much.
I completely appreciate that and your comments as well. Thank you. Next call. Gentlemen, how many more left in the queue?
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we sure can. Please go ahead.
Thank you. This is Ryan Sherman with the Riverside Sheriff's Association. We represent the district attorney investigators in our county, and like to align ourselves with the comments made by the other opponents of this proposal. We have very serious concerns, not just about lowering the standards for district attorney investigators, but also what will happen to our existing members and potentially new members to the different retirement formulas that would need to be bargained for: 4850 time, 24-hour peace officer status, ability to carry a firearm, POBAR protections, workers' comp presumptions, joint task forces participation. All these things could be negatively impacted as a result of this proposed change. And so therefore we are strongly against this and hope that the commission will defer until a later time to have more discussion about it.
Thank you, and I very much appreciate your call. I just want you to know that it has never been the intention of the commissioners or anyone at Post to lower the standards. And you'll be hearing more about that later, but I just felt compelled to absolutely assure you, lowering the standards is not what we're looking to do. But thanks again for your call.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, next call. Okay, I'm going to give it one more minute if you haven't called and you'd like to, or if you're on the call and not speaking up, we'd love to hear from you. So I'll give you 60 more seconds to make that happen. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Dropped off? So is there another caller on? Okay, okay. Thank you. That will now be the end of public comment in that we have nobody else in the queue. At this time, I'd like to ask Executive Director Manny Alvarez to address the commission. Executive Director Alvarez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. If I can just go into the public comment period for just a quick moment. I appreciate you, Madam Chair, bringing up that I did call. So this was raised at a committee, the issue of the DA investigators and the specialized investigators basic course was addressed at the commission during public comment. It was not brought up by Post staff. It was brought up by public comment on October 22nd. I did contact the DA's Investigators Association the next Monday on the 26th. I did speak with the DA's Investigators Association with the president, told him what the issue was that was raised at the commission meeting, and I asked for feedback, and I offered to come and speak to their board to address what the issues were that were raised. I did not hear back. Obviously, yesterday, there was a number of phone calls expressing opposition. I did not reach out to the individual labor units across the state of California, but I did reach out to the DA's Investigators Association asking for some feedback. So I believe that that is going to be on the agenda for today. In speaking with the individuals yesterday, I mentioned to them that we're happy to pull it in terms of asking for a vote. Again, that's going to be up to you all commissioners if you want to vote on it, but to have more dialogue or have dialogue with the various DAs and DA investigators across the state. We're in no rush to address the issue. And obviously we would appreciate their feedback, but I think it would be wise to allow us to at least present the material today and then bring it back in the future. But I did want to go on the record and say that we did make an effort back in October to raise the issue. And of course, it was addressed again in February at the February commission meeting based on a request by the commission in October that we address the issue in February. And then again in February, we were directed to readdress it in June. So I'd like to now just speak a little bit about what I normally talk about, what we've done and where we have gone. I'm going to skip, or where we intend to go. I'm going to skip the where we intend to go portion of it and just talk a little bit about what we've been doing since the last commission meeting. You're going to hear some of it today, so I won't go into great detail. But in March, we released the AB 332 report on academy failures. You're going to hear from my colleagues today on that report that was released. Hopefully you all have it. It was a ton of work for our staff, and I'll comment after they speak today. Also, we released in March crowd control guidelines. This was a request by the governor's office and the governor's office task force that we update those guidelines. Those again were released in March, and now we're starting to discuss the training that can come with it. I do want to thank two commissioners. I think I thanked them on the email, but Commissioner Lili Bowie and Commissioner Jethro Moore for participating in the second workshop on the crowd control guidelines. In March, we also released a Did You Know video, short PSA style videos on gun violence restraining orders. In April, we worked on the requalification course, which you will hear more about today on changing the curriculum for the standard requalification course. Also in April, we started for the first time to do audits of PC 832 presenters. That will be an ongoing initiative for us to audit those basic courses for PC 832. In May, just a couple weeks ago, we conducted an online detective symposium over the course of 3.5 days. Some of the topics included rapid DNA testing, genealogy, officer-involved shootings, officer wellness, and various other topics. There was approximately 1,200 individuals that participated in that training. We thank all the officers across, or all the detectives across the state that participated in that training. It was hopefully very effective, and we got a wide group of people that participated. Also in May, just a couple of weeks ago, we released another short video on use of force standards and guidelines, a policy update that mirrors the requirements of SB 230. As you may know, or you do know, we released the use of force standards and guidelines last fall. This is a 15-minute video that highlights all the key points of SB 230 and what's in those standards and guidelines documents. Also in May, we finalized the ETRR month-end close process. That was a manual process that took a significant amount of time for our staff to complete on a month-end basis. It's now fully automated, and as you know, the training reimbursement request modernization has been going on for the last couple of years, and we thank the folks in computer services for doing that. Lastly, and we've touched on some of these, we're still working on elder abuse guidelines pursuant to legislation. Pursuit driving is for the most part done, as are the missing persons guidelines, and those should be coming out any day now. We sent out a bulletin last week on AB 846 on bias screening of peace officer candidates. That has to be in place by the end of the year. Hopefully you had an opportunity to look at that bulletin and see who some of the subject matter experts are that are producing that new screening criteria pursuant to legislation. We've also been working on the aviation security program. I think we're in the final stages of that. We've held our workshops and now just need to update the curriculum for those peace officers that are assigned to work at airports. And then lastly, this is more of an administrative thing, but in the month of April, if any of you have been in our building, we had a library. We've retrofitted that library with 13 additional cubicles, which may not seem like a lot, but those cubicles were obtained from another state agency that didn't need them anymore. They were repurposed for us, almost brand new. As many of you know, the cubicles cost us between $5,000 to $8,000 a piece. We got them for free. Thank you to Tobias and some of the folks in the Computer Services Bureau that were able to find them. And then for all the administrative services folks that helped gut out the library and get them installed, it was a major to-do for us. So at a time where we're returning money to the state, we're also trying to be mindful and not waste our money. And we were able to establish this new space essentially for free, other than the installation costs. So that's kind of what we've been doing. I won't go into what we plan on doing for the next 3 months prior to the September meeting, because I think you're going to hear a lot of it today and I don't want to steal anyone's thunder. So thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to speak and for allowing me to speak to the public comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Director Alvarez. As always, it's hard to listen to that without feeling a great deal of pride in the work that you and the staff are doing every day. Thank you. Our first item of the approval of the action summary and meeting minutes from the February 24th, 2021 commission meeting. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Motion Bowie.
Motion Bowie, second.
O'Rourke.
Second Long. Any questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
That motion passes. Now moving on to the consent items. We will be having a presentation on consent items number 7, 12, and 14. Would the commissioners like a report on any of the other consent agenda items? Please raise your hand if you do on Zoom. Seeing no one. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, Commissioner Bui.
Can we get one on 11, please?
I'm sorry,
11?
11? Yes, absolutely. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to proceed then. We'll start with 7 and then go to 11, 12, and 14. As to 7, at this time, I will call upon Executive Director Manny Alvarez to provide us with the report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of COVID pandemic, as many of you know, we were offered an executive order, or we were operating under an executive order as of May of last year. We issued, pursuant to that executive order, a series of waivers. First are waivers for the requalification course. These are all the waivers that we have produced. They should be made part of your agenda. What you're seeing on the screen is included. The reason we are presenting this to you, aside from you wanting to know, is the executive order calls for us to inform the commission every time we issue a waiver. Those are the waivers we have issued in February, I believe, February or early March. We sent out letters to all those individuals that had received a waiver for the requalification course, reminding them for a second time that they are required to complete requalification as soon as the executive order or the state of emergency is lifted. We sent a second letter, a second reminder the first week of May to the departments and to the individuals that still need to complete the requalification course, because they will no longer be able to serve as peace officers once that executive order is lifted and once the state of emergency is over. Reading between the tea leaves with everything that's been going on in government, we've been seeing Governor Newsom talk about mid-June, so we wanted to get the reminder out to those that still need to complete the training. I believe there were 7 or 8 individuals that we sent reminders to. The second one is for certification to conduct racial profiling training. As most of you know, in order to conduct racial profiling training as an instructor, you have to be certified to do so. The Museum of Tolerance was unable to certify instructors almost for a 12-month period due to COVID. So we were able to provide waivers for those instructors to present the racial profiling training, which is a legislative mandate. We haven't issued any of those since, I believe, January or February. The Museum of Tolerance is now conducting regular training on racial profiling for instructors. We have stopped doing those certifications, knowing that the requalification course is now widely available across the state, as well as the racial profiling training. Lastly, we issued a bulletin about 3 weeks ago to the field on chemical agent training. As many of you know, we suspended the exposure element to training in the basic academy based on concerns that people that have been exposed to chemical agents may be more susceptible to COVID due to the impact on the lungs, the temporary impact. We lifted that with the bulletin in early May, advising academies that they need to start doing it by a certain date. So that went out actually late in April. And that concludes my remarks in regard, or my presentation in regards to the COVID pandemic.
Okay, there was not a request for 8, 9, 8, or let's see, 4, 8. Did you want to comment on that anyway, or on diversity?
Sure. So number 8 is a report on post-staff workforce diversity. That was a request by the commission behind the scenes that we start producing our diversity statistics for our employees. That is a report that is generated every 2 years by CalHR. We are keeping the data ourselves as well based on this request. And we anticipate that we can publish that information once per year and include that as part of the commission agenda.
Okay, thank you so much. And now we're going to go to agenda item 11, the report on distraction strikes or blows. At this time, I will call upon Bureau Chief Mike Radford, Training Program Services Bureau, and Law Enforcement Consultant Raymond Nadiego, Basic Training Bureau, to provide us with this report. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Mike Radford, I'm the Bureau Chief with Training Program Services. Today we'll do a quick review of courses potentially referencing the term distraction strike. So in preparation to report on this subject, we conducted a course lookup of presenter courses in EDI that may or may not have included specific or reference language with the term distraction strike, using specific titles of courses that would likely contain that language. In our first initial search through basic training curriculum, we found that no basic training curriculum contained the term distraction strike or distraction technique. The following categories were used to search for in-service course as well for the same verbiage. The courses that we primarily searched were use of force, crowd control, arrest and control, impact weapons, SWAT, basic SWAT including SWAT supervision and commander, ground control, defensive tactics, and less lethal. So using these general course terms, all courses with the specific words were identified and reviewed for the terminology of distraction or distraction strikes. A total number of 458 courses were searched, and of those, the term distraction was utilized in 100 courses found. So looking through the ECOs, we determined that the term or the word distraction was used as a descriptor in 3 following fashions. Number 1, the process of diverting the attention and coordination of an individual or the officer themselves from a desired area of focus. Number 2, the process of diverting the attention and coordination of an individual by certain movements or actions of the officer with no physical contact from a desired area of focus. And 3, the process of physically striking an individual with either blunt force object or personal body weapons to divert the attention or coordination of an individual from a desired area of focus. So looking through these descriptors, there was no discernible or explained difference between the term distraction strike or just a standard strike. Some courses did use the word distraction. Some used the word explicitly referencing distraction strikes and detail how to accomplish the particular movement or strike. Some courses would say distraction technique, but would not go into specific detail about the performance.
Good afternoon. I'm Raymond Nadiego, Law Enforcement Consultant assigned to Basic Training Bureau. And as Bureau Chief Radford mentioned, distraction strikes are not part of the post-basic course curriculum. What is taught in Learning Domain 33, Arrests and Control, is how body parts can be used as personal weapons against peace officers by combative persons, and as a force option for peace officers when it is objectively reasonable with the goal to control and arrest a combative person. What is emphasized, though, from the beginning of Learning Domain 33, Arrest and Control, and throughout the basic course, is the importance of understanding legally justified use of force, arrest and control principles, the need for regular and ongoing training throughout the officer's career, and how all are equally necessary to arrest a combative person during a dangerous situation as safely as possible.
I'm sorry to put you on the spot, and if you don't have an answer to this, okay. Do you recall what the context was behind this request? The advisory committee?
I can answer that. It was a specific request from a committee member, Dave Honda, who's a chief of police in Watsonville.
Didn't Chief Honda also reference a lawsuit in San Diego that had to do with this?
He referenced a lawsuit in the Santa Cruz area, and he wanted to bring it forward as a matter of discussion, given the preponderance of input on use of force with respect to the public, but also to see whether or not the commission wanted staff to do further investigation or research to determine how those terms and topics apply within the construct of Granby-Connor 835A and AB 392.
Commissioner Bowie, this was discussed at the advisory council meeting just before this. And my sense was because of this lawsuit from Santa Cruz, thank you for correcting me, there was some confusion about what that was. And then they wanted Post to further define it and then consider whether it was going to be part of our programs or not. And that request was made from them, asking us as commissioners to then ask Post staff to look into those issues. That was something he just wanted addressed.
Got it. Thank you.
Madam Chair. Yes, the advisory committee did have a discussion about that, and as a body, we would recommend that the commission direct Post staff to research the regulation and the training for distraction strikes.
That was the request. Let me turn to council briefly here. So request was made in advisory for the commission to ask for that. Clearly not agendized, just
Correct.
something that came up. So how would we go about discussing it and or voting on it?
Well, you couldn't take action on it. You could set it as an agenda item for the next meeting.
Okay.
So you could direct staff to do that.
Okay. And the advisory committee is, when I was listening, voted that that is what they'd like us to do.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So what this commission can do is then direct staff to go ahead and do that. So at this point, since it was brought up and all the professionals are here on this issue, is the commissioners okay with the notion of asking staff to look into this? Anybody object to that? And we'll agendize it for next time? Okay, hearing no objection, that would be the request of the commission based upon statements made at the advisory committee. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, we are going to go back to items 8 and 10. So let's start with, you did comment already on diversity. So now we're going to go on to 9 and 10. At this time, I will call upon Bureau Chief Drew Wyatt, Management Counseling and Projects Bureau, to provide us with a report. Thank you, Drew.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to speak, and good day to all the post commissioners. My name is Drew Wyatt, the Bureau Chief for Management Counseling and Projects Bureau. Larry Ellsworth is the project manager on this project. I'm here to talk about the crowd management guidelines. This report is for information only. Recent events, large-scale protests, and legislative changes have created a need for post staff to review and update the crowd management intervention and control guidelines originally published in 2012. Staff worked with subject matter experts and other contributors on an aggressive timeline to update and revise the 2012 Crowd Management Intervention and Control Guidelines. And this is a report on the status of that project. Over the past year, instances of unlawful and sometimes inappropriate uses of force by on-duty uninformed law enforcement officers in the United States, or uniformed law enforcement officers in the United States have been recorded and widely played on social media. More recent events within our nation's capital have increased attention on crowd management incidents and events. Regardless of the frequency, such incidents are unacceptable, tarnish the credibility of law enforcement, hamper relations between the law enforcement and the communities they serve, and degrade the hard work, commitment, and sacrifice of California's law enforcement profession. Such videos have sparked widespread demonstrations that have sometimes transgressed into unlawful assemblies and even riotous behavior. Post staff have carefully monitored the relationship and attitude of the general public toward law enforcement during these incidents. These changes appear to demonstrate a reduced lack of trust and respect for law enforcement within some communities, which has led to large-scale demonstrations. Some of these demonstrations have unfortunately devolved into unlawful assemblies and riots. Law enforcement responses to the unlawful behaviors have often been captured on video and played through social media. Some of these law enforcement responses included non-lethal uses of force to manage crowds, and unlawful behaviors have sometimes been interpreted by the public and by legislators as inappropriate. Post staff met twice with a group of more than 15 SMEs and other contributors, conducted research on crowd management, and have introduced, discussed, and referenced the governor's protecting and facilitating the right to engage in peaceful protests and demonstration recommendations for law enforcement paper into these revised guidelines process. Staff has now completed the revised guidelines. Like Manny said, these guidelines were initially released in March, and we've updated them as of late as April 20th, 2021. I'd also like to personally thank Commissioner Bowie, Commissioner Moore, and newly appointed Advisory Commissioner Beauchamp for participating as subject matter experts on this very important project. That is all. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to thank Larry Ellsworth and Drew Wyatt and all the SMEs that worked on this. We spent several days and many, many hours working on this. So I appreciate all of your insight and your expertise. And this is my first time getting to work with Missy Olin. I take it she's worked with Post for quite a while. She's phenomenal. So continue the great work. Appreciate it.
And Commissioner Bowie, we all appreciate you. So thank you. And Commissioner Long, thank you for your involvement in that as well. It was Jethro Moore. Commissioner Long didn't do a thing for that committee? Okay. We appreciate that you didn't. Okay, thank you. Now on to 10. At this time, I will call upon Examination and Research Consultant Tamara Brown, Strategic Communications and Research Bureau, to provide us with a report on peace officer training, number 332. Thank you, Ms. Brown.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commission members, members of the public. I'm John Loudon, Bureau Chief for Strategic Communications and Research with Tamara Brown, and I'll discuss our project, AB 332, which was effective on August 30th, 2019, mandated that Post collect data and conduct analysis on pass-fail rates with academic testing, remedial training, and retest practices in the intensive regular basic course. AB 332 also placed an emphasis on data related to driving, EVOC, and firearms training. The data includes, but was not limited to, the gender and race of each student in relationship to the success rate of the RBC Academy. Post was required to collect at least 6 months of data and submit a final report to the legislator by April 1st of 2021. Data was collected between July of 2019 to July of 2020 and included 2,590 Academy students and 23 RBC Academies. The research was completed by Tamura Brown, which is right here with me, and Irene Wong Chi, which is with me as well. Tamura will be able to go into the details of the report and the analysis.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Sorry, my voice is a little scratchy from allergies. So let me start with highlighting that the data collected, was only from the intensive regular basic courses because of the time constraints in the bill requirements. Thus, the total student count of the 2,590 is relatively small. During the time of data collection, if staff encountered any missing data from a student's records, we had to admit their information from the overall calculations of the outcome of the academy, meaning the success and failures. And then also important to notice that generally any other missing data would be mostly due to a clerical error, either by data entry or intent or unintended omissions of that data. So with out of the 2,590 Academy students, 1,877 Academy students, which is roughly 72%, successfully completed an Academy class. And 495 students, roughly 19% of the Academy students did not. We had about 8%, which is 218 Academy students that we had missing data that weren't included. The report that we provided gives a detailed breakdown of the percentages and the number of student performance. But from here on out, I'm going to just provide you with percentages instead for ease of following along. So for those students who successfully completed the academy, 59% of those academy students were male and 12% were female. We had less than 1% of the total academy students either not respond or they just preferred not to say whether or not they were male or female. 31% of the total 2,590 students, 31% were Hispanic, 26% were Caucasian, 4% were Asian, 4% identified as more than one race, 3% were African American, and then we had 1% identified as Filipino, and then less than 1% were Pacific Islander and American Indian or Alaska Native. We had less than 1% students that did not respond with their ethnicity. Additionally, the results indicated that 11% of the academy students withdrew from an academy for personal reasons. So 5% were dismissed because of failing any required tests, and 3% were dismissed for non-testing related reasons. So this could have been either by injury or if they violated the rules of the academy. Further, per AB 332 directions to post, we also conducted an analysis of remedial training practices pertaining to the emergency vehicle operations course, or EVOC, and firearms. So here we had 2,090 academy students completed the EVOC testing. 81% of the academy students successfully passed all the EVOC tests during the initial phase of testing. 17% failed the test in the initial phase, but they passed during the retest. Less than 1% of the students failed both the initial and the retest phase. So then we had 2,091 Academy students completed firearms testing. 82% of those Academy students successfully passed all the firearms tests during the initial phase of testing. 15% of those students failed the initial phase, however, they passed during the retest. And then again, less than 1% of students failed both the initial and the retest phases. We then combined both of the EVOC and firearms testing. So we had a total of 2,058 students that completed both the vehicle operations and firearms testing. So remember, as I stated earlier, if we had any data was missing, we did not include in the overall totals. So here we had 68% of Academy students successfully passing all the vehicle operations and firearms tests during the initial phase of testing. 28 of those Academy students failed the test initially, but passed during the retest. And then only 2% of the students failed both the initial and retest phases. And finally, we looked at the Academy's remedial training practices. In all, there were a total of 3,120 retests completed. So of those 3,120 retests, 2,983 of those retests, which is approximately 95.6% retests successfully passed. And remedial training can be offered multiple times prior to taking the retest. So you have to keep that in mind as well. Therefore, what is reported is the total number of retests completed rather than the number of students who received remedial training. Any Academy students who failed the initial test in any of the RBC Academy required tests were provided additional remedial training. The hours of that remedial training vary from one student to another based on the needs of that individual. And then the results indicated that 2,320 male Academy students completed a retest, with 2,230 or 96.1% successfully passing their retest. 797 female students completed a retest, with 750 or 94.1% successfully passing their retest. The students may have been counted again more than once if they had failed more than one initial test failure. So the remediation outcomes were also aggregated by race. So we had 1,314 Hispanic students completed a retest with 95.3% success for passing their retest. 1,076 Caucasian students completed a retest with approximately 97% successfully passing their retest. 221 Asian students completed a retest with approximately 94.1% success. 201 African-American students with the retest successfully completing was 92.5. 183 of the students who identify as more than one race, 94.5% successful in their retest. 76 Filipino students with a 93.4% success rate. And then 19 American Indian or Alaskan Native students, and they had 100% successful passing with the retest. All in all, we had only 17 students who did not provide a response here of their race. However, we do know that 100% successfully passed their retest. And finally, 13 Pacific Islander students completed a retest, again with 100% successfully passing their retest. So overall, excuse me, the results of our correlational study show that female students have a retest pass rate of about 94%, while males have a retest pass rate of 96%. And all of the ethnicity groups have a retest pass rate of over 90%. So at this time, staff, we did not recommend that we make any changes for the minimal standards for the appropriate level of remedial training be established. Essentially, what we found was that the diverse representation in the academy class was small from the time frame of the 1 year where we collected data from July 2019 to July 2020. And so because of the small sample size within the minority groups, inferences from the report should not be made incorrectly by any group regarding success or failures in the academy. And this is very important because we run a greater risk of assuming there's a significant result when in fact it may be due to any other extraneous factors.
Your last paragraph, I think, you talked about women's pass rate being at around 94%, men being at 96. What was the group that was at 90?
Those would be all of the ethnic groups were all over, their retest pass rates were all over 90%.
So all of the ethnic groups, including Caucasian.
Let me just double check and make sure. I believe so, but let me just double check.
This isn't a test.
My talking points. Page 91. 51. Yeah. Yes, it does include Caucasian.
So I'm just trying to understand it from a layperson's perspective. Only less than 1% of the group did not choose agenda for one reason or another. So 99% of the group chose agenda, either male or female. And I understand 96 and I understand 94. I'm still a little confused about 90. Can you explain that to me?
So essentially, what we're just saying is that each ethnic group, instead of breaking each group down by the percentage, they all had a passing rate over 90%.
Okay.
So it varies, but we're just showing that the rate is very positive of passing.
So was it your research, did you determine that people of color did not have a lower or higher pass rate than Caucasians? Or was that part of what you were looking at? Or were we just saying that it didn't matter, essentially? I'm just trying to get to the bottom line of your research.
Correct.
Bottom line was that didn't matter.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And this was presented to the legislature in March of 2021.
Yes, I believe so.
And it's also available for the public to review on the Post website.
Yes.
On the Post website, I'm sorry, I didn't have an opportunity to check, are there charts or just the verbal description you just gave us?
Charts as well.
Okay, I think charts would help me understand.
Yes.
No, this is very important research, and I thank you for all the work you put into it. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we open it up to the other commissioners? Okay, commissioners, anything else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
May I-
Thank you.
may I,
Oh, I'm
Madam
sorry.
Chair, if I may add
Executive
just
Director.
a couple of things. A lot of that data is located in the executive summary. It's a couple of pages, so you don't have to read through the entire machinations of the math and everything else. You could see that in the executive summary. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tamura and Irene and John, in terms of the collection of data, we collected 2,590 data on 2,590 students. Generally speaking, we graduate about 5,000 from the academy every year. That number was obviously lower, unfortunately, because of COVID. So it was only on 2,590. The legislation asked for EVOC and firearms training data, but they went further and can be found in the report. All the other academic tests, scenario tests, all of that data is also in there collected by gender and by race. We did not break it up by academy because some academies only had one session with few people and you could easily identify the individuals. So it's aggregate data. But in terms of the numbers of the 2590 that started the academy or that we collected data on, I believe we said in the report that there were 17 individuals that failed out of EVOC out of the 2590, and I believe approximately 40 that failed out of firearms during that 1-year time period. Is that correct?
That sounds about right.
Okay. So just to me, it was a fairly low number considering the number of individuals that have gone through, and also to the credit of the basic training folks and the academies, the pass rates after the first failure are in the 90s for all demographics. So it was a significant pass rate. So I appreciate that fact. Then I'd like to also just give a couple of thank yous. One to all the academies that had to supply all this massive amounts of data to our folks or our friends and colleagues at SCR. We appreciate the effort to fill out spreadsheets and send them in. Thank you for doing that. And then lastly, to the people that are up in front of us right now, and I'll name them one by one, but this started with a program, a project with one of our former colleagues, Chow Chan, that got promoted, and Tamura early on. Chow moved on, and then comes John and Irene towards the last part of it, and we put an enormous amount of pressure on them because it's like the deadline's coming, the deadline's coming. What do we got? Of course, we simplify everything in the executive office. Hey, what takes so long? Come on, you should be done with this by close of business today. So they did a phenomenal job. They put up with us, which is also very extraordinary. But thank you for what you all have done, the three of you, and Chow as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
On behalf of the commissioners, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go on to 12 and then 14, and then we'll take a break. Okay. Okay, 12. At this time, I will call upon Bureau Chief Mike Radford, Training Program Services Bureau, to provide us with a report on Regulation 1070. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. Mike Radford, Bureau Chief with Training Program Services. So specifically, this report will be on an update of a possible update of post-regulation 1070 instructor refresher training. So currently, with no regulation requiring refresher or update training for 1070 courses, in an effort to assure instructors of 1070 courses are maintaining current and relevant training, POST has taken proactive steps and is in the beginning stages of information gathering to see if instructors of certain courses should be required to take refresher training. So our focus will first be on the following subjects: arrest and control, firearms, EVOC, and use of force. Subject matter experts are currently being identified and will be consulted in determining several of the following items. Should a particular subject require, should a particular subject require refresher training for instructors? What will the minimum length of training consist for the subject? What frequency should the refresher training be? 2 years or 5 years, or what they deem appropriate? Should there be a process for equivalency? And what should the minimum learning objectives for refresher training be? So once this information has been received from the subject matter experts that we bring together in these particular subject fields described, recommendations will be brought to the commission at a future date for your consideration. With that, I could open for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Radford? Okay, thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
You're good. Okay, on to 14. At this time, I will call upon Legislative Liaison, Public Information Officer Megan Taffy to provide us with a report reflecting new laws and legislation impacting POST. And what a busy season it's been.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Yes, Joyce, it has been a very busy, interesting session so far. The legislature is almost halfway through the 2021-22 session. There's been a lot of activity since our last meeting. All of the bills have been heard in their various committees and then have either passed through to the opposite house or been made into a 2-year bill, meaning it could be acted upon in 2022. Today, I'm going to highlight the remaining legislation that could affect post or law enforcement in general. My report will not encompass all legislation that could affect law enforcement. And I just note that we're only halfway through the session and there's a lot more action to occur between now and the fall. So I'll get to the point. The biggest bill I think that will affect post this year on peace officer decertification. We started the session with 3 bills introduced on this topic, and we are left with 1, which is Senate Bill 2 by Senator Bradford. And as I indicated, this would have a significant impact on post. This bill in its current form would require post to create a new division titled the Peace Officer Standards Accountability Division, who would be charged with conducting investigations into serious misconduct and review potential grounds for decertification. This division would also be responsible for issuing proof of eligibility for any individual who is hired or enters an academy prior to receiving their basic certificate. The division would also be responsible for collecting fees and renewing basic certificates every 2 years. Next, this bill would create a Peace Officer Standards Accountability Advisory Board comprised of 9 individuals, 2 of them representing law enforcement and the remainder explicitly stating shall not be former peace officers. The bill is very specific as to who shall serve on this board. All members of that board will be designated by either the governor or the legislature. Of significance, this board would have the ability to direct post staff to investigate any potential grounds for revocation of certification of an officer. And the bill also expressly states that the commission shall review all recommendations for decertification made by this board and shall adopt those recommendations or submit a written analysis as to why they do not. The bill also outlines what the definition of serious misconduct shall include, but ultimately leaves it up to the Post Commission to define and adopt that regulation. These are only some of the mandates in the bill. I believe it's 33 pages in length. There are many, many nuances that would affect post overall and require a significant increase in staff and resources to fulfill. Additionally, the bill contains an entire section on the Tom Bain Civil Rights Act to eliminate peace officer qualified immunity. That's pretty much the whole first 7 sections of the bill. To date, there have been no significant amendments made to this bill. It was passed out of the Senate last week and is now headed to the Assembly.
Let me ask you, some of the reporting on that seemed to indicate that some things were dropped. Was that reporting inaccurate? Was it exactly the same as it was when it first started?
Yeah, there's been no significant amendments to the post aspect. They did make some small amendments to the qualified immunity piece, but since it's been introduced, there has been maybe 2 sentences changed.
So excuse my ignorance in this, but the main law talks about decertification. Then there's a add-on which talks about immunity. And so they're 2 very different ideas, but they're being brought to legislative attention as one.
Yes.
Is there any discussion about separating those 2?
Not that I've heard.
And okay.
It does have to go through 2 different committees. So most public safety bills only go through the Public Safety Committee. This bill, because it has a governance aspect to it, has to go through the Judiciary Committee as well. So I've seen battles on both sides of this bill for those various reasons through those committees.
I believe that we suggested this was going to cost an enormous amount of money. Does this have to go through appropriations?
It does.
It hasn't gotten there yet.
It did. It went through on the Senate side.
And they said, fine.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions about that bill? Because I think both those bills interest all of us a lot before we move on to everything else.
O'Rourke, have you guys done a preliminary cost for the, what the cost would be to run that part by post?
We have, and we've supplied those numbers to the legislature at their request. And I think I mean, even with what we submitted, I still think it's difficult to really assess the amount of work that what could create.
Anything else, Commissioner O'Rourke?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Any other commissioners? I'm sorry, I can't see your hands raised because of the slideshow, so just speak up.
Yes.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Bob Doyle. CSSA is not opposed to the DCERT part, but we're opposed to the elimination of qualified immunity and also the makeup of what is termed the commission.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Moore. I'm glad to hear Commissioner Doyle say that, but I did have some concerns when you say the funding aspect of this bill. Where's the funding going to come from? Was that ever discussed to have posts create these other positions?
As far as I know, it would be coming from the general fund. Oh, the fees. That hasn't really been identified. The bill does not indicate where the fees should come from. I know that there's been discussion on it coming from the individual versus the agency, but that hasn't been defined.
Any other questions or comments on this piece of legislation before we move on? Speak up again. I can't see if your hands are raised. Okay, thank you. Please go on.
There are a couple of bills still remaining on crowd management. AB 48. This bill originally prohibited the use of kinetic energy projectiles and chemical agents during any assembly, protest, or demonstration. It has since been amended to allow the use of chemical agents during an assembly, protest, or demonstration, but only if authorized by the commanding officer at the scene. This legislation would also require agencies to report monthly to DOJ any use of force, including the use of either a kinetic energy projectile or a chemical agent. SB 98 would allow duly authorized representatives of any news service, online news service, newspaper, or radio or television station or network or any media source access to any law enforcement command post or closed area at a demonstration, march, protest, or rally upon receiving authorization from a commanding officer at the scene. That was the most recent amendment to add that piece on that they must receive authorization from a commanding officer at the scene. Prior language did not include that. AB 89 by Assemblymember Jones Sawyer. This bill would require a peace officer candidate to be 25 or have a bachelor's degree or an advanced degree from an accredited college or university. This requirement would not apply to current officers. And I wanted to note that no amendments have been made to this bill since February 17th, since it was introduced.
Yes, Commissioner Long.
On that, on AB 89, right, the Jones Sawyer bill that requires officers to be over 25 unless they have a college degree. I assume part of the rationale is a diversity issue, but it strikes me that might be going the opposite direction. Do we, and speaking of runs, diversity runs, would it be a large operation to identify the ethnicity of officers under 80, under 25 years old? Well, I mean, would this bill maybe inadvertently be doing away with diversity by, I mean, I have no idea what the diversity breakdown would be of officers under the age of 25, but you see what I'm getting at? I don't know whether or not this would be an inadvertent byproduct of this bill might be if we found out that officers under the age of 25 without college degrees were disproportionately minorities, would this bill might be going the wrong direction? I don't know the answer. And I don't know, I didn't see anything in the analysis, Megan, or anything. So that seems kind of a fundamental question to this bill. And I wonder with our whole emphasis, and I know Chair Sawyer Jones wants to go towards diversity, but anybody answer this question? And could we answer that question?
I'm sorry if I may, Megan. So I watched a couple of hearings, including the select committee hearing in December. Chief Daniel Hahn from Sacramento, and he brought up his own personal experiences that he would, under these requirements, he would not have been able to become a peace officer because I think he started, if I remember correctly, when he was 19 or 20 or at a young age, and he did not have a college degree, said he wouldn't have been able to have gotten into the profession. There was some back and forth going back, about that topic. So I think it is an openly discussed issue. I don't know what's right or what's wrong in that regard. We do obviously keep statistics that are supplied to us by individual agencies on gender and on race. And obviously we keep it by age as well. So we could
answer the question if asked.
If asked, yes, I would think so.
And if I may add, Commissioner Long, we sit on an advisory board of public safety educators. And in discussions with them, that is a concern for the criminal justice educators. Their specific concern is it costs about $5,000 out of pocket to put yourself through an academy right now. And they do share your concerns or your observations that certain demographics are financially strapped, and this may be an additional burden for somebody to try to enter into the profession if they simply don't have the financial means to process those payments and pay to put them through themselves through an academy.
Yeah, and coming from state sheriffs, all of the comments that have been made, those are the exact issues that we've raised. We believe it would affect, the very applicants that we're being encouraged to consider for employment.
Commissioner Moore here. I believe I would echo those sentiments. Being frankly, if Black and brown people are graduating at a lesser rate, that appears that it would disqualify or not qualify less people of color than actually increase the numbers of people of color. So I would echo that concern if we're going to try to get more people of color to participate in policing.
Well, it seems to me then, if I may, Madam Chair, that one of the associations of someone apparently needs to ask us the question, post the question, because the data could be, it seems to me, intuitively, it would indicate support for what Sheriff Doyle is talking about, for example. Somebody needs to ask post for that information, which would seem to be fairly dispositive.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Donlin, just a question on this. I share the exact same concerns everyone else has. I think this is actually going in the wrong direction for a profession that is struggling to get recruits. To Mr. Loggins, you talk about the educators. Have the legislators reached out to Post to maybe ask Mr. Long's question, Commissioner Long's question?
Let me just comment on our ability to comment. Long ago, there was a ledge committee that Commissioner Moore chaired, and then the governor's office made it clear that we were not and should not take a position on legislation. Therefore, we disbanded the ledge committee, and we have not taken a position, which is not to say that any of you as individuals or any of you are parts of any other organizations can't take a position, but Post cannot.
In fairness, Madam Chair, you're right. But having sat on the commission with the likes of yourselves and the other folks on my fancy screen here, I think everyone is interested in expanding the numbers of people who come into the profession and, increase in diversity. So I don't think it's taken a position on on legislation, but if we're asked the question, I think we should be prepared to answer Commissioner Long's legitimate question.
And I'm still trying to figure out what the likes of myself is, but okay. And I'll ask.
Now, Madam Chair, please. That is a positive remark. Let me just assure you, when you go to the Urban Dictionary later, that's a positive remark. Commissioner Doyle will text it what it means to you.
I appreciate it. Okay. And I'm going to ask Executive Director Alvarez to comment.
I would like to also add a little misconception about the data that we collect. So obviously we collect data from departments on appointments. Those departments tell us the date of birth, the gender, the race of the individual. What we don't necessarily collect is education data. We only collect education data when somebody submits a request for an advanced certificate. That's when we collect data on associate's degrees and bachelor's degrees. So you may have an officer who is hired at 22, 23 years old, who has a bachelor's degree and never applies for any other certificate. That person's profile within Post will not show any higher level education other than we know that they graduated from high school or have their GED. So that data is not collected until such a time that they apply for a certificate. I think I'd mentioned at one point, we had an individual who had all of the certificates and then I believe had gone on to get a PhD or a master's degree, but all the certificates were based on the others. And he said, hey, I want you to update my educational training data. We didn't because it was specific to the certificates. So we do not collect that data for all. I believe Megan has produced some reports for either the legislature or the associations when asked on the number of individuals who have either AA degrees or bachelor's degrees in our system, but it's not 100% accurate just because we don't necessarily collect the data from all those individuals.
Thank you. Megan, would you like to say anything further about that?
Also, Madam Chair, not to belabor, but if the other group of people that it would eliminate are military veterans. Because typically those that we consider are not people that have bachelor's degrees. They may be working on them, but they don't have a current bachelor's degree.
And I think what's also been stated is the difficulty we're having with recruitment. And that is certainly a concern for us to be cutting off anything arbitrary. So, which is not to say we don't all individually agree. Now, Commissioner Long, there was a specific question that you wanted to know if Post could address. Could you ask that question again?
I think, man, you just answered part of it, which is you would not be able to do a run that shows how many officers by ethnicity there are under the age of 25 who lack a college degree. You would only be, you only have the information on those who have applied for an advanced certificate.
Correct. The last
Might
part
even
we
be
would not be able to.
disproportionate for the people who are under the age of 25 without a college degree that have applied for an advanced certificate. So it may be very problematic data, it sounds like.
That is correct. The last part is what throws it off, the education requirements. And Megan, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I know you ran some reports with CSB on active duty, current onboard peace officers that have minimum of an AA degree and a minimum of a bachelor or a bachelor's degree. Do you remember those percentages off the top of your head?
I don't exactly, but I remember it being a lot higher than I thought it would be. I want to say it was almost a third of the number of officers we have, if not more, that had some sort of degree.
Under the age of 25?
I don't think we ran it with the age. I think it was just based on college education for what we had.
Okay, anything else on this?
Rick Brazeau has a question.
Yes.
Manny or staff, are we collecting age and education under 332? And is that a possibility to start doing in the future, just to have a comprehensive database?
So obviously, we're not collecting it under AB3. If there was if there was new legislation, then obviously we would do what we were told. Yes, we would collect that data. I presume it would be continual because individuals are going to get their AA degree, then they're going to get their bachelor's degree, and we would be required to keep that data. I think from our standpoint, it would be I don't want to say simple without talking to our Computer Services Bureau folks. It may be a simpler ask on our end than for the agencies to supply us with that information. But it could be done, sure.
Okay, I just suggest that because we're already collecting some pretty detailed demographic information and kind of over-reporting, which is a good thing beyond 332. So this may be an opportunity that just for us, just to have that data to start collecting it at the entry level when they start the academy. Not necessarily to go back in time, but at least at the entry level.
Yeah, and I don't believe that we collected that type of data under AB 332. Is that correct, Tamora and Irene in the back? We did not ask for education. Oh, you do. So Tamora and Irene are saying we do have the data under that 1 year window of 2,590 students. I take it it's by AA, bachelor's, master's, PhD? Okay. So we do have that, Commissioner Brazil, for AB 332 for that 1 year window.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner
So,
Long.
and then tomorrow, is that also then, that's also includes by ethnicity? There we go. We got a good snapshot then. If somebody who has a problem with this bill would care to ask us for it, how's that?
Thank you, Commissioner Long.
Commissioner O'Rourke.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I believe this bill is going to have some changes to it coming up with with some the talks that have been going on from my understanding. Something may have already come up, Megan. I'm not sure when the last time you checked on it though.
I'm trying to get to that point, but everybody keeps asking questions.
Okay.
So gentle. Please go on to that second point.
So there is another bill on the Senate side, SB 387, which would have required posts to work with California University and community colleges to develop a list of courses to include as requirements for obtaining a basic certificate. That bill was pulled at the last minute last week for reasons unknown, but since Commissioner O'Rourke already kind of called it out, yes, some of the law enforcement associations have been working with Joan Sawyer's office for quite some time. So I am assuming that we will see some sort of merge between the two concepts soon. I'm assuming because you never know how it's going to happen, which is why I don't always divulge my secrets.
Anything else on any of the bills or any other questions for Megan?
I have more bills.
Oh, yay.
I told you it was a
Oh, I
busy
thought there were just
session.
that many. Please go on. Anything on use of force?
Just a few. So AB 26, this bill is actually on use of force. So excuse my slide there, it's incorrect. So this bill adds to the government code several definitions of excessive force, interceding, and retaliation. It would require officers to use all resources to stop excessive use of force, including physically, and immediately report any such use. It also requires all local agencies to add to their use of force policies a prohibition on retaliation against an officer who reports any violation of use of excessive force. AB 490, this bill is this same author of the bill last session that prohibited the use of the carotid restraint. This bill is similar language in that a law enforcement agency shall not authorize techniques or transport methods that involve a substantial risk of positional asphyxia. And the bill further defines what positional asphyxia would be. Right before our commission meeting started, this bill was being heard on the assembly floor, and it did pass through to the Senate. Assembly Bill 718, peace officers, investigations of misconduct. So kind of oddly opposite to SB2, well, not opposite, but in conjunction with SB2. This bill would require, commencing January 1 of 2022, a law enforcement agency to initiate and complete an investigation into allegations involving the discharge of a firearm that resulted in death or great bodily injury, sexual assault, or dishonesty by an officer directly related to reporting, investigating, or prosecution of a crime. So those three types of misconduct would require agencies to initiate and complete those investigations regardless of a voluntary separation by that officer. It also requires the agency to reach a finding of either sustained, not sustained, exonerated, or unfounded. Again, regardless of if that officer voluntarily separates. AB 931, this bill would require post to develop training on duty to intercede specifically. It requires the training to be at least 8 hours in length and include both classroom instruction and extensive simulator-based or live scenario training. This course would be required to be incorporated both in the basic course and as a standalone in-service training mandated to be taken every 2 years. The bill language is very specific as to what the course shall include, such as robust and interactive discussions on active bystandership, inhibitors to intervention, and how intervention tactics can be used in a variety of settings. Are there any questions on the use of force bills before I move on to the next set of bills?
Again, I can't see you, so please speak up. Okay, please continue.
I promise these are the last two. AB 57 is a bill that would require specific hate crimes training to be added to the basic course. It would also require post to create an interactive course for in-service officers on hate crimes. And finally, this bill would require every officer to complete post-certified hate crimes training by January 1 of 2023 and every 6 years thereafter. SB 494, this bill is fairly new to the table. It was a gut and amend, meaning that it was already in the opposite house and they changed the language completely. This bill would require post to create a course on ethical human engagement and advanced interpersonal communication skills. Additionally, this course would need to be incorporated into basic training and the post ICI core course. And finally, this bill would require all local agencies to adopt policies on ethical human engagement, advanced interpersonal communication, and science-based interviewing, and require regular and periodic training. Are there any questions on those bills?
Any questions about that?
So all of the bills I have discussed have been passed out of their respective houses. I believe there was 2 I was waiting on. The assembly was still meeting when we started our meeting today. So they're heading over to their opposite house for further debate. I very lovingly refer to this process as a similar activity of giving your Italian grandmother a taste of your marinara sauce and asking for feedback. These bills are going to be highly scrutinized before they are returned to the House of Origin for concurrence. So a lot more activity is going to occur between now and the end of August, and all legislation has to be passed through by September 10th. And the governor has until October 10th to sign or veto.
Thank you. Any other questions? I loved your analogy with the Italian mother, and I personally experienced it by asking my grandmother to taste my matzo ball soup, and all she could do is shrug.
Right.
So I get it. Thank you, Megan. And now we're going to take a break.
Can I say-
No,
may I say one
yes.
thing? In regards to the legislation and the future commission meetings, we have commission meetings in September and December. Some of these bills, if they pass, will be implemented, or the turnaround time is January 1. Some of them will require regulations to come behind the bills in terms of processes. So we've had some discussions about whether certain bills, if they make it through, whether we're going to have enough time to come to the commission with proposed regulations in September when the governor hasn't signed the bills yet, or in December when the bills may be becoming law in January of next year. We can always push them through the emergency rulemaking process at the Office of Administrative Law. But our concern is that we may have, should certain bills make it through that will require regulations, that we may have to add an additional commission meeting perhaps in the month of October or early November to get these processes in place.
When do you think you'll know whether you need to add the meetings?
Probably end of September.
My guess would be, honestly, probably by the end of August.
Let me just turn to Toby for a moment here. Toby, is there a specific statutory amount of time for notification of additional meeting?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Is there a specific statutory amount of time that has to occur between the announcement of a meeting and a meeting?
No, as long as there's sufficient time to agendize it under Bagley-Keene. So if you have 10 days notice, you can set a meeting.
Okay. All right, thank you. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, it is now 2:41 or 2:42. Let's take an 8-minute break and come back at 2:50. Thank you. I'll get you 8 minutes. Okay, everyone, we're about to start on the afternoon, second half of our afternoon session. And we're going to start off with the finance report. If I could ask the audience to be quiet, please. Thank you so much. We're now going to start off with the finance report from Commissioner Long.
Hi, thanks. The finance report was really a subcommittee of the subcommittee, me and Commissioner Brazil. So at any rate, if we could get that first slide up, it'll go quickly. Just the budget. In short, the May revision budget, the budget that is now before the governor, is exactly the same budget that we talked about in February. So there are no changes, period. If you look there, you see the $83 million in the far right column and the bold face. It looks, and then right above that, that nice little arrow there, thanks, that the general fund amount that you see there, the $35 million, is $10 million less than last year. That is what we talked about in February. It's a reversion of $10 million from monies previously appropriated to post that really couldn't be used during the COVID period. So it's not a cut in that fashion. So it's really basically the same budget we're talking about. There's something here, hold on. The only other thing worthy of note is the 5% cut to state ops, which all departments and agencies have had to accept. That continues on. That in the case of Post is worth about $1.4 million. Then to contracts, if we could just do the one contract slide. For 21-22, there it is. There are several contracts that we had to approve, that we have to approve today, that we did not get to for different reasons in February. And I thought it'd be worth going through them relatively quickly here, just because in several cases we're being asked to approve them after the fact due to errors. We talked about this morning. We don't need to go over it again, but due to errors, they were not brought before the commission. So in several cases, we'll find that these contracts are already in process, in place, but we're being asked to approve them after the fact. It is an error that they were not brought to us. We've discussed it. Going forward, we're going to discuss more ways to, maybe polish the process a little bit. But nonetheless, we can go through them relatively quickly. The bottom line was, at least our subcommittee of Commissioner Brazil and myself didn't feel that there was anything substantive in terms of the policy or the contracts themselves that warranted any type of corrective action or trying to avoid a contract or anything like that. So the recommendation from the subcommittee is to approve these contracts. Now, number 7 up there, they're the bold-faced one. Number 7, the QAP, that has been pulled per conversations with Manny and his staff. That'll be back before us in October in a new and brighter and improved fashion. Number 9, the state controller audits contract for $250,000. We saw no issues with that. That was done. All the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed. Number 10 was the use of force simulations training. The training, that's $667,000 contract with Long Beach State. It was problematic only in looking at this one, we realized that the underlying contract for the prior year for $301,000 was never brought before the commission. So we had never approved that contract. And now we're before us is approving a contract that is based upon a contract that just didn't come before the commission. Again, an error. I want to stress that no one suggests, or there's no reason to think there's anything, anything afoot. It was simply an error. Now we're being asked to approve that $667,000, which essentially doubles the prior contract for Long Beach State. Then there's 3 amendments to the learning portal contract. Off the top, it's at $47,000, $152,000, and $1.6 million. The first 2 are relatively minor in terms of what the commission has to approve. You may recall that we are required to approve contract amendments of $25,000 or more. The first 2, $47,000 and $152,000 are over that 25. And again, through oversight, we're not brought before the commission. The third one, to get you to that 1.8 million, is $1.6 million. And the reason that didn't come before us, talking to Manny and the staff, is that it was proposed through a budget change proposal. It was approved in a budget specifically for that purpose. Staff believed it did not need to come before the commission for approval. It did, it does, but it was inadvertent. So now that is before us. The learning portal, self-paced conversions, that $2 million you see there, that also should have come before the commission and did not. Same reason, basically. Staff thought that, mistakenly, that since it had been approved in the budget specifically, it need not come before the commission. In fact, it does need to come before the commission. And the last is the self-paced course development, that $900,000. Again, all the i's were dotted and t's were crossed and all looks fine. So we see no problem substantively with those. And if there are any questions for Manny, the staff, or anyone from our colleagues on the commission, this is where we stand at the moment.
Any questions? Commissioner Long, one moment, I think Executive Director Alvarez has a comment.
Yes, one thing that came up at the Finance Committee that we did not have a specific answer to, and I thank the ASB staff for pulling it out of the archive, so to speak. There was a question as to the $175,000 threshold. Again, we can approve contracts that are under $175,000 without going to the commission. And we can also approve without going to the commission contracts that are contract amendments that are less than $25,000. We didn't know when that came in place. Those amounts were added in 2013, or they were increased to those amounts in 2013.
And let me add that Commissioner Brazil brought up the issue of should we be looking at increasing those thresholds, inflation or whatever it would be, and we agreed that we discussed that going down the road. Is $25,000 too low? Is $175,000 too low? What would justify changing either one of them? Now, looking at these contracts, even if you quadrupled your $25,000, it really wouldn't have addressed any of them except the one in the learning portal. But nonetheless, it is something that, although if it was 2013, we don't really have probably that much of an inflationary adjustment, but it's something that we all agreed to talk about going forward in the process of making sure these don't slip between the cracks again, and also to see what the appropriate thresholds are.
Commissioner
So
Long, I listened to your discussion today, yours and Commissioner Brazil, about the 25,000. And I estimated, based upon both of your concern and your alarm, that it would be 3 times that amount, 75,000. The question is, I think you wanted the commission to discuss this, or did you want to wait and go back to the finance committee once there was a full finance committee?
prior to acting on those things?
Pardon me?
Prior to acting on any change?
Prior to doing whatever it is we need to do to seek that potential quadruple to the 25,000.
Personally, I mean, I would be fine sitting down with whoever was interested and at least getting the rationale for why we should. I mean, an inflationary adjustment always makes sense and you round up. I don't know how much that would really, Rick's concern, and Rick, you can speak to your own concerns, but we don't want to hamstring the staff for small contract addendums.
So I think there are a number of things we could do. We could ask the staff to come back the next meeting and make that presentation to the finance committee and then bring it on to the commission. Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah, that seems to make the most sense to me. Someone has a better.
I don't think that requires a motion. Okay, it just requires, please, could you do that? Okay, thank you.
Yes, we will do that.
Yeah. And the other thing we ask going forward is, and I'm sure everyone reads every word of the write-ups here behind all these contracts, but that maybe we could go for a little bit more of a unified concept, not asking for a great deal more work or anything, but just streamline is fine as well. But just they do vary from proposal to proposal, and that would be helpful as well. So we're not approving contracts, that we haven't really been able to read about until the day we see them. Yeah. And that would be it from the finance committee.
Any other questions or comments from any other commissioners about the finance report? Commissioner Long, thank you for putting so much work into the finance committee. It's really appreciated. Okay, so now we have a motion. Let's see. One moment.
It's a
Is there-
motion.
I'm sorry.
Is there a
Yes,
motion?
Do we need to vote on the consent? We haven't made a motion on consent. Thank you for asking that great question. And the answer is yes. So let me do two things. Let me go back to item 14 before we go forward to the finance. And let me ask Chair Waltz an important question. Did the advisory committee have any comments on any of the items provided in the consent section of the agenda that you have not already articulated?
No, other than what we've already spoken about, we recommend the approval.
Thank you. And as that was the last item on the consent agenda, is there a motion to approve the consent items?
So moved, Doyle.
Second?
Brazil.
Okay, now I believe we need a roll call because it's part Zoom. So please take a roll call. Let me first ask, are there any questions or comments before the roll call? Okay, let's proceed with the roll call.
Barcelona? Yes. Braun?
Yes.
Brazil?
Yes.
Louis? Donaldin?
Yes.
Doyle?
Yes.
Dudley?
Yes.
Yule?
Yes.
Long? McMahon?
I believe he's off the call.
Marsh? Moore?
Yes.
O'Rourke?
Yes.
Ramirez? Thank you.
Okay, and therefore the motion passes. And now let's go back to the finance report. Is there a motion to approve the finance report?
Moved by Moore.
Thank you.
Second, Donlin.
Okay, questions or comments? Okay, please take a roll call.
Barcelona?
Yes.
Braun?
Yes.
Brazil?
Yes.
Donaldin?
Yes.
Doyle?
Yes.
Dudley?
Yes.
Yule?
Yes.
Long? McMahon? Marsh? Moore?
Yes.
O'Rourke?
Yes.
Ramirez? Thank you.
And that motion passes. Now we will move into contracts. We will be reviewing and voting on the contracts by bureau. We have 2 entirely new contracts to review. Additionally, we have several existing contracts for which post staff is requesting additional approvals. If there is a contract up for approval, which could be considered a conflict of interest for you, please abstain from the contract by number. Ms. Nunez will call a roll call vote for each group. When your name is called and the item you have identified is in the group, please say something like abstain from item 3, but yes or no on all of the contracts in the group. Are there any questions before we begin? Please take a moment to review all the contracts under consideration. Okay, we're going to start with contract item 7. Item 7 is a report on request to review the contract for the Quality Assessment Program for the Executive Director. We will be tabling this item until the next commission meeting. Executive Director Alvarez, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
First, we have one contract for the Training Delivery and Compliance Bureau, contract item 9, local agency audits. Is there a motion to approve this reoccurring contract?
Move Brazil.
Second, Doyle.
Ms. Nunez, please take my questions, comments. Ms. Nunez, please take a roll call.
Barcelona?
Yes.
Braun?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Yes. Donaldin?
Yes.
Doyle?
Yes.
Dudley? Yule?
Yes.
Long? And Marsh? Moore?
Yes.
O'Rourke?
Yes.
Ramirez? Thank you.
Thank you. The motion passes. Next, we have contract item 13. Contract item 10. Someone go on mute who is not on mute. Oh, you're good. Okay, we're all good now. Okay. First is contract item 10 is regarding the continued presentation of force options / use of force de-escalation training, the trainer class. Is there a there a motion to approve this reoccurring contract?
Motion Donlin.
Second,
Second, Bowie.
questions, comments? Ms. Munoz, please do a roll call.
Barcelona,
Yes.
Braun,
Yes.
Brazil,
Yes.
Bowie, Donaldin,
Yes.
Doyle,
Yes.
Dudley,
Yes.
Yule,
Yes.
Long, Mann, Marsh, Moore,
Yes.
O'Rourke,
Yes.
Ramirez. Thank you.
Motion passes. Contract, are we on 11? No.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question? I thought we were doing them all by one bureau at a time. Is that no? We have to do each contract individually? Okay, not by LTR. Okay, my apologies. Thank you.
I've lost track. Did I just do 11? I'm up to 11. Okay. Contract item 11 is an amendment to increase funding for the learning portal. Is there a motion to approve an increase to funding for these contracts?
Doyle.
Is there a second?
Bowie.
Okay. Any discussion, questions? Ms. Munoz, please do a roll call vote.
Barcelona,
Yes.
Braun,
Yes.
Brazil,
Yes.
Bowie,
Yes.
Donaldin,
Yes.
Doyle,
Yes.
Dudley,
Yes.
Yule,
Yes.
Long, McMahon, Marsh, Moore,
Yes.
O'Rourke,
Yes.
Ramirez. Thank you.
Thank you. Contract items 12 and 13 are new expenditure contracts, one for learning course and one for self-paced course development. Is there a motion to approve these new contracts?
Motion Brazil.
Second? Ron? Questions, comments? Ms. Munoz, please do a roll call vote.
Barcelona,
Yes.
Braun,
Yes.
Brazil,
Yes.
Bowie,
Yes.
Donaldin,
Yes.
Doyle,
Yes.
Dudley,
Yes.
Yule,
Yes.
Long, McMahon, Marsh, Moore,
Yes.
O'Rourke,
Yes.
Ramirez. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Munoz. Okay, that concludes the finance report and contracts. Now we'll move on to the rest of the agenda. Item D is a report on proposed changes to Commission Regulation 1005, minimum training requirements for district attorney investigators. At this time, I will call upon law enforcement consultant Kurt Bunch, Basic Training Bureau, to provide us with a report on this item.
Afternoon, Madam Chair.
Afternoon.
Afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Kirk Bunch. I'm a law enforcement consultant with the Basic Training Bureau. I'm going to provide information on proposed change to the minimum training requirements for district attorney investigators, Commission Regulation 1005. I'm going to briefly talk about the identified issue, provide some background with an analysis, and I'm going to end with a recommendation. Issue. Currently, Commission Regulation 1005A requires the completion of the post-regular basic course, RBC, for district attorney investigators, which includes those individuals who have completed the post-specialized investigator basic course, SIBC, from being appointed as a district attorney investigators. Background, POST has received numerous inquiries about a method to allow individuals who qualify for California law enforcement investigator positions to become district attorney investigators. At the February 2021 commission meeting, POST staff was directed by the commission to look at options allowing the training SIBC completed by these individuals to qualify them for district attorney investigation positions. The regular basic course, RBC, is designed for general law enforcement and includes specific training on topics which include traffic enforcement, patrol techniques, and handling of calls for service incidents. The Specialized Investigator Basic Course, SIBC, is designed for investigators and includes specific training in investigative topics such as presentation of evidence, computers and computer crime, etc. Commission Regulation 1005 defines general law enforcement as duties which include the investigations of crime, patrol of geographic area, responding to full range of requests for police services, and performing any enforcement action on the full range of law violations. Therefore, graduates of the SIBCs are not eligible for appointment as general law enforcement peace officers without completion of the RBC. Analysis. Staff have updated Commission Regulation 1005A, it's in attachment A, to allow completion of the RBC or the SIBC to meet the training requirements for district attorney investigators. This change will provide a district attorney's office the ability to hire individuals who have completed the SIBC or maintain the current training requirement of the RBC. Recommendation, I will end. Staff recommends that the revision to Commission Regulation 1005A be amended pursuant to the rulemaking process in the Office of Administrative Law, OAL. If no one requests a public hearing, the amendments will become effective January 1, 2022.
Thank you, Kirk. And before we get into whether we'll even be taking that up today, which will certainly be discussed,
Yes.
there was some discussion at the last meeting about a possible bridge course. Can someone tell us where that went?
We did look into, this is Jim Grotkow, the Bureau Chief for Basic Training Bureau, and thank you. We did look into that and saw a number of issues or concerns potentially, which included the cost associated with the presentation of the course and the attendees of the course. There was also a considerable amount of hours and which translates into weeks or time that would have to be dedicated to that in order to attend that course. It was questionable whether it was sustainable, whether there was going to be enough applicants to sustain presentations throughout the state of that course. It would have to include very costly skills-based training in order to facilitate it additionally. So we had one presenter that was interested in the course, but did voice concern about the ability to present it in between their regular courses that they're putting on. So in addition, in 2012, it was reported that it would be unworkable in the agenda item that was done at that time due to course shortfalls and issues related to sequencing of instruction and testing. So based upon that, we, internal to POST, started looking at other options that might be more feasible to it. And in review of Regulation 1005, we determined that a change to that Kirk mentioned would be more feasible and appropriate for the situation.
So question for either you or Kirk, in terms of the material that would have been ascertained from the bridge course, is that material going to be adequately covered in the other course in terms of both your opinions?
Kirk is a former district attorney investigator, so I think he can probably talk to the point.
Yes. So I don't know if it would be sufficient. There are some differences, but I am a believer that the SIBC is driven for investigator positions, which I think it will meet the requirements of a district attorney investigator. I worked in that field for 19 years, and I have to say with the issues facing retention and recruitment, I think it would benefit.
Thank you, Kirk. Okay, any questions first before we get to?
Could I make one more comment?
Please.
One of the things that was brought up was a concern about the experience of the field officer coming to a district attorney's office. But regulation does not prohibit a graduate from the RBC to go straight to a district attorney's office, which would mean that you wouldn't necessarily have gained that street experience that many specialized investigators coming from out of the state or federal service or even within state service would have already in the field of investigations, which is right up the line with the district attorney's investigators' roles and responsibilities.
Yes, thank you. That's certainly true. Okay, any questions before we get to comments and discussion? Commissioner Bui? Just stretching, okay. Do you have something to say? You'd like to speak? It's time.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Now, I would like to add a few things on this topic because I've become intimately familiar with it and address some of the concerns that were raised on both sides. So obviously with the bridge course, the challenge with creating the bridge course that my colleague Jim brought up, there's also some question as to whether somebody who graduates from the investigators course, if they now go through this bridge course, would that allow them to become a deputy sheriff or a police officer working patrol? And yes, it would. And there was some concerns about that. And those are righteous concerns. I would like to just address some of the minimum training topics in each one, because this was asked of us yesterday afternoon by some of the individuals that were on the public comment, and I didn't have the opportunity to get into detail or have the data in front of me. So the investigators course, or SIBC, is 591 hours. It includes a total of 80 hours of training that is not included in the regular basic course or the RBC, 16 hours of surveillance, 16 hours of administrative procedures, 32 hours of case management and sources of information, and 16 hours of computers and computer crimes. Those are all only directed in the Investigators Academy. In terms of the RBC, as we all have discussed quite at length, it's 664 hours is the minimum training. It includes certain training on vehicle operations, patrol techniques, vehicle pullovers, crowd control, traffic collisions, custody, and lifetime fitness, which are not included in the Investigators Academy. Those topics, specifically patrol techniques, traffic enforcement, and crowd management, are geared towards the quote general law enforcement officer as defined in our existing regulations. So based on that, I feel that the investigators course is designed for investigators. The RBC is defined as is codified for general law enforcement. As my colleague Kirk just mentioned, general law enforcement is very specific in our regulations. Their duties include the investigations of crime, patrolling a geographic area, and responding to the full range of requests for police services, i.e. handling calls for service. So we're requiring those individuals who become DA investigators to fall under the general law enforcement definition by post. To me, it's a contradictory way of doing things. I don't believe that a DA investigator by our own definition is considered general law enforcement. There was some discussion this morning in public comment about what would this do to 830.1 and whether they would move them out of 830.1. That is not anything we're proposing. Obviously, we don't get involved in the penal code, and I don't disagree with them. They should be covered as 830.1 and have those full police authorities, just like a police officer, a deputy sheriff. The second aspect is, aside from the training, some of the issues that have been raised are the qualifications, the experiences of the individuals who become DA investigators, that they lack the experiences that a police officer or patrol officer or a general law enforcement officer may have. We deal with training, not with experiences. That is for agency heads to determine. Agency heads determine who they want to hire as a lateral. They can set a requirement as 5 years, 10 years, detective experience, whatever that agency desires for experience. That is up to them. It's not up to us. But there are two sides to the coin with experience. To me, if you address experience from one side of the coin, why is it that an individual who graduates from the academy, as Jim pointed out, can go directly and work at a DA's office simply because they've completed the RBC? That is perfectly permissible. It's also perfectly permissible that a person graduates from the RBC and goes to work at a small state agency that perhaps only has 2 or 3 employees or peace officers that don't carry weapons, that don't drive patrol cars, yet that individual is going to receive their basic certificate upon completion of probation. And then after they get their basic certificate, can go work at a police department as a police officer or a deputy sheriff. So there are two sides to the coin, and how, or that's one side of the coin in terms of experience. We don't get into the experience realm. However, if you do go on the other side of experience, there are certain individuals, as I believe one of the callers today called in on from Department of Justice, who indicated that why is it that a person who has spent an extensive amount of time conducting investigations for the Department of Justice, why is it that they are not allowed to work at a DA's office, yet somebody who completes the academy can go work at a DA's office? I'll give you an example, and it's a true life example. There is a manager within DOJ that approached me before I came on to post that is at the second level of supervision for a financial crimes task force. That person is not eligible to work financial crimes at a DA's office because they can only work in the specific areas of welfare fraud or child abuse, I believe. Second of all, if we go into the experience level, I think it is a disservice to district attorneys who want to hire certain individuals that come from the federal side or from out of state that may want to work at a DA's office that are specifically excluded. And I'll give you some examples. It's the way the rules are right now. An ATF agent who applies for a waiver and then completes an additional 4 weeks of post-certified training cannot work gun trafficking cases, cannot work gun crimes at a DA's office. A DEA agent who's been working drug matters for X amount of time can apply to post, get their investigator's waiver, take an additional 4 weeks of training, yet cannot work on a HIDTA task force at a DA's office. A Secret Service agent who has been working financial crimes and perhaps is a forensic examiner, a certified forensic examiner, again, can apply for a waiver to post, complete 4 weeks of training, but is not allowed to work as a forensic examiner for a DA's office as a peace officer. To me, we are eliminating certain population of individuals that I think would benefit California law enforcement. And at the same time, it is up to that agency head. We're not saying that they shouldn't be hired from the RBC side or that there shouldn't be limits. We're just saying there's another pool of individuals that have completed requisite investigator training that you should be able to look at and perhaps consider as a candidate pool. Lastly, it's very, very clear the SIDC is directed towards investigators. The DA investigator position, it's in the title of their name, of their job classification as an investigator. This was reviewed in 1983 by Post. Post did a study on the job functions of a DA investigator compared to that of a standard police officer or deputy who works patrol functions, and it identified the significant distinctions. So when we hear that this is lowering the standard, I do not believe, personally, I don't believe that is the case. And it is not, it's granting more opportunities for agency heads to select candidates. And at the same time, as was referenced in an earlier part of the meeting today, we constantly hear that we have less and less peace officer candidates in the profession across the country, and including in California, yet we want to, at the same time, limit the pool of potential peace officers that can conduct investigations in California. It doesn't seem to be in line with me. I did mention at the beginning that I think this should be tabled for a future meeting based on the request from the associations or the DA investigators. I think that's reasonable. This should be done as a thoughtful way, unless you all decide to terminate it now, which we can do. But I do ask if we can just kind of kick the can down the road for a future commission meeting to give us additional opportunities to speak to some of those DA investigators and then come back with some additional proposals. Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry about that.
Madam Chair, can I say a couple things? When I first started at Post, I was a regional consultant and I had Region 4, then I went to Region 1 and where I met Randy. One thing I did notice when I was going around and working with the DA investigators, many of them were requesting perishable skills exemptions for certain areas because they did not utilize certain things. They asked for exemptions for driving, sometimes for firearms because they didn't carry firearms, et cetera. So there were certain things that I had to go to the executive director prior to Manny and ask for these exemptions to be made. So there's that caveat too, in terms of the training portion of it. And I was also privy to individuals who were going right out of the academy to the DA's office as a DA investigator. So there was no experience there. They gained it there on the job. And they, like Manny was talking about, their remote areas, they're isolated and they were getting what they could get. And they're missing out on the ability to get seasoned individuals because we were requiring an RBC. That's another caveat too, is you need to think about the remote individuals. People we heard from today were probably had a lot of individuals available to them to be selected. But there are some areas of California, the majority of California, that is isolated. They need some assistance. So why would we hinder that? So it's just my response to being in the region and working with individuals who are remote and who need some assistance, and also the exemption to the perishable skills portion. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from any of the other commissioners? There has been a comment and a discussion that who is that? That would be Commissioner Brazil. Thank you, Commissioner.
Sorry about that. It's hard to raise my hand up and get in front.
I
appreciate the comments earlier. Those were labor unions. And I think their conversations need to be with their hiring authorities because each one's got a different contract. I'm okay if we push this off, but I'm also ready to vote affirmatively for the changes. It gives the prosecutors the option, not a requirement, to substitute the basic investigators course. It doesn't force a DA to do it, just allows them to do that. I do appreciate, again, Manny reached out, but those are the comments we heard today are concerns that they should take up with the prosecuting attorney, the hiring authority. Our job is to look out for the entire state. I don't see issues with it as presented, and I support staff's recommendation and vote to adopt this today.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments? Yes.
If that's a motion by Commissioner Brazil, I'll second it.
All right.
Okay, stand by.
Oh,
We're still in discussions, but I certainly accept your willingness to accept a motion if a motion is posed. Yes. Mr. Waltz.
Randy Waltz. The advisory committee did receive a presentation on this and we had some discussion on it. And the committee did recommend the approval of the agenda item. However, as the chair or the interim acting chair right now, I don't have any objection to delaying it for further discussion. Now, I will give my perspective as a former DA investigator for about 12 years. I am aware of the limited candidate pool, and with otherwise qualified and experienced investigators that are especially from some of our state agencies that have the SIBC, they're not qualified to be DA investigators under the current regs. But I will say that one of the things that we did discuss that I think is most important, it was just mentioned that the appointing authorities, the agencies, the DA offices can set standards that are exceeding our regulations. They can put other limitations on the candidate pool that they choose to have. Another point is that there's a 40-hour mandatory DA investigator course that supplements training that's specific to the job of a DAI. So I don't have any objection to delaying it. However, the advisory committee did recommend the approval.
Thank you, Mr. Walls.
I'll
And
make a formal motion.
let's see, there were a couple of comments. Commissioner O'Rourke, please.
Yeah, I just had a question. One of the public comment people said that this was changed a while ago for a particular reason, but they're not sure just why. I'm just curious, do we know any of that? Or, I mean, that'd be my concern, is if there was a history of why it was changed prior, that maybe we need to research that. And that would be my suggestion, is why we need to table this till another time so we can do further research.
I did engage in some of those discussions. I think there have been a variety of reasons. And one of those was that was articulated to me was when DA investigators didn't have that same standard, they were viewed by other law enforcement agencies as with less respect. That was something that was posed to me, that was said to me. And also there was some discussion about the fact that the change in standards opens up these good jobs to other people. That was expressed to me. I can tell you on a personal level that I know a fantastic FBI agent that our office is very interested in hiring because specifically of his skills. And the reason I bring this up is because every district attorney's office is going to have different needs at different times. And if we now open this up to other highly educated investigators, both federal and state, we're going to get best thing in the name of public safety and for the people. So those are my comments mixed with the comments I've heard.
May I make a comment, Barcelona?
Yes, please.
I think both sides have good points on it. And what this really begs the question of is our archaic penal code system for peace officers. I mean, if you look up while we were talking, I went to the penal code sections. You got 830, 830.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.31, 0.32, 0.38, and et cetera. And it's just such a mess over the years that the legislature has put together, and all these different pseudo type peace officer classifications. Some carry guns, some can't, some don't have the ability to make, to do certain things, others do. Some can carry assault weapons and be on task forces, others would be a felony, and et cetera. And this really needs to get fixed down the road here. We really need to look at one peace officer classification. Everyone's certified under post. Everyone has all the right training. And then we fixed it for good. Because right now what we're doing is we're just putting a Band-Aid on it. And I'm perfectly willing to put the Band-Aid on it right now, but the real problem is this archaic penal code system.
So for now, what are you suggesting?
I'm prepared to vote on it now, but I'm also okay with the other side, coming in and presenting and, as well. So I'm okay with whatever the commission's pleasure is, but the real problem is this system that we have with multiple classifications that have various powers and don't have powers, and the Barney fights and that sort of thing. And it needs to be fixed because we're constantly trying to Band-Aid these sections and get things done. And it was all done because, at various times administrations didn't want to pay for something. They make some classifications as peace officers just so they have subpoena power, so they can go into offices and demand documents and things because the guy or gal is technically a peace officer, but they don't carry weapons, and they have minimal training. And I think it's a detriment to the classification. Everybody needs to be trained appropriately, certified under post. Everyone has all the same training. And I think it eliminates a lot of our problems. I know that's kicking the can down to a future issue, but that's really where it needs to be fixed because we continue to put Band-Aids on this every year or so.
I understand. I'm just interpreting what you're saying is you would like at some point to propose to take a deeper dive and look at this and see how we can have equity. But for now, you're in support of moving ahead with this, be it now or at the next commission meeting. Did I?
Yeah, because we have a huge recruitment problem, as everyone knows. And, I came from a regular basic academy, and then I went later on into state investigations. So I've worked with both classifications, both patrol and special investigators. And over the years, these people are all trained, quite highly in all the areas that are important to all of us. And I don't have a problem with them moving into the DA's investigator class because I've worked with those people for years. I understand the association's point of view, and I think it's a correct one. They see it as as lowering the standards because they are advocating for these individuals, and it's easier to advocate for them if the standards are high. I understand that. So I don't know that either side's wrong, but I'm for moving forward on it. But if this commission would like to explore it, I'm okay with that too.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. I know the Commissioner Brazil also wanted to speak. Is there anyone else that wanted to speak before Commissioner Brazil on this? Commissioner Brazil, please.
I'd like to move staff's recommendation.
Okay, so now you've posed the motion. And is there a second?
Doyle.
Okay. Any questions or discussion? One moment. Okay, would you please call a roll call vote on this?
Barcelona,
Yes.
Ron,
Can't hear you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Brazil,
Yes.
Hui,
Yes.
Donaldin,
Yes.
Doyle,
Yes.
Dudley,
Yes.
Yule,
Yes.
Long, McMahon, Marsh, Moore,
Yes.
O'Rourke,
Yes.
Ramirez. Thank you.
Okay, that motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, moving on to item E is a report on the proposed changes to Commission Regulations 1005, 1007, and 1008, and Commission Procedure D1. At this time, I will call upon Staff Services Manager Anita Finna, Basic Training Bureau, to provide us a report on this item.
Hi, thank you, ma'am. Good afternoon, Commissioners. This agenda item was presented to Commission in May of 2019 and approved at that time. However, it did not make it to through the regulatory process. So the Office of Administrative Law requested that additional information be added. Post staff is proposing a revision to Commission Regulations 1005, 1007, 1008, and Commission Procedure D1. In reference to Attachment A, Regulations 1005 and 1007 would reflect the effective date of January 1st, 2022. In Regulation 1008, which is the basic course waiver and requalification requirements, post staff recommends the updated verbiage identified as number 5, that presenters shall notify the Basic Training Bureau when 15% or more of the students attending the course fail any post-required scenario or exercise test to include both initial tests and retests. The notification shall be made within 24 hours of the failures. Test failures of 15% or more shall be based on the total class size at the time of test administration. Additionally, post staff recommends updating Commission Procedure D1. Many students are attending a basic course administered by a presenter that is not their employing agency. And currently, basic course presenters are not required to notify the employing agencies when a student fails a post-mandated test. Basic Training Bureau has also experienced situations where presenters have administered post-mandated tests that resulted in numerous student initial test and retest failures. Therefore, post staff recommends updating Commission Procedure D1, 1, requiring presenters to notify a student's employing agency following an initial test failure. This would allow the employing agency the opportunity to provide counseling to the student prior to the presenter administering the retest. And secondly, it is also recommended that presenters be required to notify the Basic Training Bureau when 15% or more of the students attending the course fail any post-required scenario or exercise test to include both initial tests and retests. The notification shall be made within 24 hours of the failures. The test failures of 15% or more shall be based on the total class size at the time of test administration. Thank you. Any questions at this time? Manny?
I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarification, Anita, this is because I think some of the commissioners are going to remember an agenda item similar to this that went through in the past.
Yes, sir.
We had the last agenda item that was kicked back by the Office of Administrative Law. Going into it, I think we said that they would have to report a significant or something like that, a significant number of failures. They didn't like that. They wanted more specificity and thus the 15% requirement. Is that fair to say, just in case they've heard it before?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Okay, thank you, Anita.
Advisory Committee recommends that the commission approve this item.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the changes as described in the staff report?
Motion, Donlin.
Second,
Doyle,
any questions or comments? Ms. Nunez, please do a roll call.
Barcelona,
Yes.
Braun,
Yes.
Brazil,
Yes.
Bowie,
Yes.
Donilon,
Yes.
Doyle,
yes.
Dudley,
Yes.
Yule,
Yes.
Long, McMahon, Marsh, Moore,
Yes.
O'Rourke,
Yes.
Ramirez.
Thank you, and motion passes. Item F is a report of the proposed changes to the training and testing specifications for the requalification course. At this time, I will call upon law enforcement consultant Carrie Holler, Basic Training Bureau, to provide us a report on this item. Thank you, Carrie. Welcome.
Madam Chair and Commissioners. My name is Carrie Holler, and to my left is my colleague, Staff Service Manager Cheryl Smith. On March 23rd through the 25th, BTB, our Basic Training Bureau, held a workshop to review and update the requalification basic course. Since 2002, when this course was developed, we had not held a workshop to look at the complete course content. We had just made the updates to the learning domains throughout the years. During the workshop, our subject matter experts reviewed all the course curriculum to ensure that the course addressed current trends and met all of the legislative mandates. There were learning domains that were added. There were some that were deleted, and then there were some additional hours to existing learning domains. At the conclusion of the workshop, it is proposed to increase the hours from 144 to 158. Post staff recommends that the revisions to the requalification course be amended pursuant to the rulemaking process and the Office of Administrative Law. If no one requests a public hearing, the amendments will become effective April 1st, 2022. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Carrie, do you think you can go over what domains were actually added into the curriculum, please?
Yes, so the ones that were added that were not currently in there. Okay, the ones that were added, I got it, thank you, sorry, was learning domain 24, which is the handling disputes and crowd control, and learning domain 34, which is first aid, CPR, and AED.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? The advisory committee have any questions, comments?
The advisory committee recommends approval of this item.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve?
Doyle.
Thank you. Second?
Donlin.
Thank you. We'll count that as Donlin. And let's see, any comments or questions? Okay, Ms. Nunez, please do a roll call.
Marcelo,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
Brazil,
Yes.
Bowie,
Yes.
Donaldin,
Yes.
Doyle,
Yes.
Dudley,
Yes.
Buell,
Yes.
Long, McMahon, Marsh, Moore,
Yes.
O'Rourke,
Yes.
Ramirez. Thank you.
Okay, the motion passes. Item G is a report on amending Regulation 1018 requirements for human trafficking. At this time, I would like to call upon Bureau Chief Mike Radford, Training Program Services Bureau, to provide us with the report. Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike Radford, Training Program Services Bureau Chief. This will be in regards to 1081, Regulation 1081. So the item brought to you today proposes to amend Regulation 1081, minimum standards for legislatively mandated courses to address the following. Update the language in Regulation 1081, specifically changing the word voluntary to required. A discrepancy was discovered while Post was conducting a review of Commission regulations. Specifically, Commission Regulation 1081's minimum standards for legislatively mandated courses covers a variety of topics, one of which is human trafficking training. According to Regulation 1081, human trafficking training subsection 7 reads as follows. Participating in human trafficking training course or courses by peace officers or the agencies employing them is voluntary. Currently, California Penal Code 13519.14E states, every law enforcement officer who is assigned to field or investigative duties shall complete a minimum 2 hours of training in a course or courses of instruction pertaining to the handling of human trafficking complaints as described in subdivision A by July 1st, 2014, or within 6 months of being assigned to that position, whichever is later. So currently the Commission Regulation 1081 human trafficking training verbiage does not coincide with California Penal Code 13519.14E. The proposed change to Commission Regulation 1081 would eliminate the confusion, specifically changing the word voluntary to required. So we believe this proposed change is necessary for clarity purposes and will resolve inconsistency and align the regulation with state.
So Mike, just to be clear, the change would be that law enforcement officers who were handling human trafficking cases would be required to take this 2-hour class.
The penal code doesn't specify that it has to be investigators. It just says law enforcement officers who are assigned to field or investigative positions. So field is open to just field patrol officers.
And they would be required to take this class.
Yes.
Okay. Comments and questions? Yes.
I have a question for Mike. Mike, so this requirement is it covered or is it not covered in the basic training in the academy? Isn't human trafficking covered, the 2-hour minimum human trafficking topic covered? I'm just wondering if there's going to be additional training requirements across the state, or are they already being covered during the academy?
I can't attest to those hours. I would have to refer to my basic training colleagues. I do know that Post has the 2-hour course already developed and it's in the learning portal. And it even has language saying that it is in compliance with Regulation 1081 and the specified penal code.
Anything else? Any other comments or questions? You know, as a deputy district attorney, I handle a lot of human trafficking cases, and as the DA And I think this additional training is mandatory. It's a very unusual crime. And you have to have a thorough understanding of what it is that you're investigating, introducing, dealing with. So I appreciate this. Is there a motion to?
Barcelona.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
you,
you
okay.
first. Okay.
Yeah, I'm still confused. Because if this is 2 hours in addition to training that officers are already receiving, then should it be mandatory?
Should it be what?
I mean, should we be changing the verbiage on this if the officers are already receiving 2 hours in the academy, as you mentioned, if we can verify the hours?
If I may ask the basic training folks, I hate to put them on the spot. I believe it is covered in the academy. I could be wrong, and then the point will be moot. It's a structural change to regulation to comply with the penal code. If it's not, then yes, that would be a significant thing for tens of thousands of peace officers to now have to take a 2-hour human trafficking course. Cheryl, you were the expert on this topic. I'm sorry to put you guys on the spot with it.
I think the way it was phrased, though, it's not all officers. It's those in the field or those investigating these cases.
Correct.
But please respond to the question if you would.
We don't have human trafficking broken down by hours in the basic course. It does cover some human trafficking. What I heard Mike say was that penal code says for law enforcement officers as a detective or investigators are required to take that course. So the course that would be in the basic course would not be good for the investigator or detective officers. I was trying to pull up the penal code, but
Commissioner Bui, you raised the issue. That was your answer. Any further follow-up questions?
Yeah, there's also the portion of the officers in the field. Because, I mean, officers in the field are going to be your basic patrol officers. So it's not just the investigators.
Correct.
that penal code that's legislatively mandated, though, said it's for investigators or detectives. So the legislatively mandated course,
It actually, and I'll read it again. Every law enforcement officer who is assigned to field or investigative duties shall complete. So that's the actual verbiage directly from the penal code.
So if they had that training in the RBC prior to becoming a detective or working in the field, whatever the definitions are that you just proposed, Mike, would that cover them if that was included in the RBC? I presume it would, right?
Yes,
Because they've
according-
already had the requisite training
Yes,
in the academy.
correct.
and I would have to do research on what those topics are in 1081 versus what is required in the RBC. You know, if they're already getting it.
Madam Chair, may I
Yes,
recommend then that we do some more follow-up before we vote on this?
Certainly, but specifically what follow-up do you want? And then you can make a motion.
Follow up on, into whether or not the amount of training that is specified here is already covered in the RBC. That would be my motion, is to
Ask
determine,
do
yes.
additional Follow-up for those areas. Okay, is there a second?
I'll second Barcelona.
And Commissioner Brazil, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I had a question because now I'm confused. I was understanding that all we're doing is cleaning up the language, our language, to comply with the penal code. Is that correct? Or with the penal code? Is that correct?
Correct.
So whether we do the research or not, we still have to comply with the penal code. Our language has to be consistent with it. So we still have to clean this up, even if we do the research.
Correct.
It's not exactly
Now I'm confused.
legislation, the way I understand it, because the legislation talks about investigators and detectives. This talks about fielding, the people in the field as well.
Penal code uses the term field or basic investigators. Regulation 1081 just says that the participation in this is voluntary, and we're moving to change that to required. It doesn't specify that it has to be required during in-service. So if it was taken during basic training, then even if we move to required, it should be covered because every law enforcement officer would have taken that 2 hours, which is mandatory.
Commissioner Brazil, any further question on
I
that?
have another comment on that. In 1081, if the legislative mandates are covered in the basic RBC, I believe 1081 specifies covered in RBC, and we could add that language to 1081 if it's covered in the RBC. So while it says they must take it, it can also say and covered in the RBC.
Commissioner Brazil, your question.
No, I just want, I think we're cross-referencing two different things. One, do we teach it? The question before us is we need to change 1081 to comply with the penal code. Regardless of what we do, we have to change the language. It's not voluntary, it's mandatory. And then the second question is, are we already doing it in the RBC? So I see it as two different issues. One, we have to comply with the penal code, and that's what we're trying to do. And the second one is, where are we doing it? Are we doing it in the RBC? Therefore, we don't have to require additional training.
I think that's what Commissioner Boyd was talking about. You wanted to further investigation into that, or do you feel you have the clarity?
Right, I have better clarity now. Thank you very much. So as I understand it, we do need to change the verbiage to be in line with the penal code. And then we have the secondary issue of determining whether or not that training is already provided. Okay, so I will retract my motion to delay it. And then I will make a motion to approve staff's recommendation.
Any questions or comments? Any more confusion? Commissioner Donovan?
And I'll second the motion.
Okay. Comments, questions? All in favor? I'm
Aye.
sorry. We have to go through the routine. Ms. Nunez, please.
Barcelona,
Yes.
Braun,
Yes.
Brazil,
Yes.
Hui,
Yes.
Donaldin,
Yes.
Doyle,
Yes.
Dudley,
Yes.
Yule,
Yes.
Long, McMahon, Marsh, Moore,
Yes.
O'Rourke,
Yes.
Ramirez. Thank you.
Okay, that was the last of the training programs. The advisory committee acting chair, Randy Walsh, will report on the advisory committee meeting held this morning.
Yes, thank you. Other than what we've discussed in the agenda items, the substantive thing that I'd like to bring to your attention is the impending retirement of Chief David Honda. I'd like to thank him for his service on the advisory committee and his many years of service in law enforcement.
So is he here?
He's here.
Does he want to stand up and get applause? You don't have to stand, but we had to do the applause. Thank you so much. Anything else? Okay, any questions of the advisory committee? Do I have a motion to accept the advisory committee's report?
Motion, Bowie.
Second,
O'Rourke.
questions or comments? Ms. Nunez, please do a roll call.
Barcelona, Barcelona,
That sounded
Ron?
like my stomach.
Braun,
Yes.
Bowie,
Yes.
Donaldin,
Yes.
Doyle,
Yes.
Dudley,
Yes.
Yule,
Yes.
Long, McMahon, Marsh, Moore, O'Rourke,
Yes.
Ramirez. Thank you.
Thank you. That motion passes. On to correspondence. The following correspondence was sent from Post. From Post to Alex Villanueva, Sheriff, Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, expressing sympathy over the tragic on-duty death of Deputy Thomas J. Albanese. To Michael Moore, Chief, Los Angeles Police Department, expressing deep sympathy over the tragic on-duty death of Officer Jose Anzora. To Brian Amrosco, Acting Chief, San Luis Obispo Police Department, expressing deep sympathy over the tragic on-duty death of Detective Luca Benedetti. To Eric Jones, Chief, Stockton Police Department, expressing deep sympathy over the tragic on-duty death of Officer Jimmy Inn. And we will, of course, be sending a letter to Commissioner McMahon expressing deep sympathy over the tragic death of Sergeant Vaca. As to old business, there is no old business. As to new business, at this time, I would like to call upon Executive Director Alvarez.
Madam Chair, thank you once again. I believe the only items to address during new business are new appointments to the advisory committee. They are listed there. A request to appoint Sergeant Juan Viramontes, of the President of the Association of Orange County Deputy Sheriffs, to the advisory committee. We received a letter in writing with that recommendation. And then the second one would be a request to appoint Lieutenant Eric Swift from Napa County Sheriff's Department to the advisory committee on behalf of California Police Officers Association, retiring. And I'm sorry, the first one, Sergeant Juan Viramontes was nominated by the California Coalition of Law Enforcement Associations Board of Directors to replace Senior Deputy Colonel Burton Barron.
Are there any questions? Now we will go through a round of motions. The nominees. Is there a motion to approve Sergeant Juan
Barcelona.
Okay, except I have a sentence, but I got it. Is there a motion to approve Sergeant Juan Viramontes?
Barcelona. I can't hear you. Sorry.
I can tell you. It's okay. I think I got enough out that time.
Okay.
Is there a second? Are there any questions or comments? Ms. Nunez, please do a roll call vote.
Barcelona,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
Brazil,
Yes.
Louis,
Yes.
Donaldin,
Yes.
Doyle,
Yes.
Dudley,
Yes.
Yule,
Yes.
Long, McMahon, Marsh, Moore, O'Rourke,
Yes.
O'Rourke,
Yes.
Ramirez. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. Now, is there a motion to approve Lieutenant Eric Swift's nomination to the advisory committee?
Move Brazil.
Second,
O'Rourke.
any questions or comments? Ms. Nunez, please do a roll call.
Barcelona,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
Brazil,
Yes.
Louis,
Yes.
Donaldin,
Yes.
Doyle,
Yes.
Dudley,
Yes.
Yule,
Yes.
Long, McMahon, Marsh, Moore,
Yes.
O'Rourke,
Yes.
Ramirez. Thank you.
Thank you. And sorry, Executive Alvarez would like to make a comment.
Yes, also as part of new business for the commission meeting in September, we were hoping to do that similar to the meeting that we held last August, is a roundtable discussion on topics of interest to the commission. I believe we had 4 or 5 topics last year that you all wanted to discuss. We welcome those for the September commission. Either bring them up now or send them to me via email and we can put them on the agenda. But I want to put that out now so that we are preparing for the September meeting. I know that there are some commissioners out there who requested certain topics of discussion, so I throw that out now in case any of you would ask us to put certain things on the agenda as of today, and if not, please email them to me.
Is there any commissioner who would like to do that at this point for September, or just email Manny at a later date?
Madam Chair, this is Lamont Yule.
Yes.
There is an item that I would like to put on the agenda for September for discussion, if allowed.
Yes, please.
All right, the item, and forgive me for being long-winded, I'll try to be brief, but, I first and foremost want to thank, as a relatively new commissioner, I want to thank the staff especially for their professionalism and great deal of support. And I want to also thank the leadership of the executive director as they've tried to help get my feet planted on the ground. But as I've been looking through some of the courses and curriculums, there is an area that I'd like to put on the September agenda to at least discuss, and that would be the issue of the history of policing in the United States. The history is presented in the academy, but unfortunately, it's done where each academy has the discretion to select where or what they're going to use as content. And as an example, I know of one community that uses the Japanese internment camps as a starting point to discuss relationships. I know LA City used to, and maybe still does, use the civil rights era as another talking point to satisfy that requirement. And I think both of those points in history are very important, but where I have the concern is that it doesn't really talk about the genesis of policing in the United States. I happen to believe that we need to go back to history and talk about that evolution. And I think, it's important to talk about the good and the bad. As I personally have probably 10 different members in my family who are in law enforcement. I was asking them if they understood the history or knew of it, and none of them did after going through these academies. And so I worry about the fact that there's not a common foundation of knowledge of people entering into the profession. Where it was, where it's come from, where it's going becomes important for me, but at least understanding the baseline of where it was and how we've evolved becomes equally important. And I think that's important for three reasons. One, it gives all officers the opportunity to have at least a baseline of understanding of that evolution. The second for me is that it helps to incentivize officers and how to make sure that we avoid the dark portions of that history. And there are some dark portions that even speak to slave patrols back in the early 1800s. But the third reason is because as officers are trying to build relationships in communities, I think it's really important for them to at least have an appreciation of why even over 200 years later, there are still communities that are apprehensive about building relationships with police officers. And if they have that sensitivity and understanding of that history, they'll seek other ways to help to bridge that gap. And so I think that too lends itself, as being something beneficial to the future of the police department and our police services. But I'll end on just saying this. The other night I went to dinner with two very close friends who, we were celebrating getting out of the COVID moments. And so we sat out on the patio at dinner talking, and I was sharing some of this with them. One of them just happens to be a Jewish American who is a psychologist. And he said to me, well, why wouldn't anyone want to know more about the history or the genesis of policing, the good and the bad? And then he said something that, that really resonated with him. He said, it would be the equivalent of someone saying, well, we don't want to talk about the Holocaust because it was bad, but it's that experience that keeps us from moving back into those dark periods, as well as remembering those that we had lost. And that resonated with me because I really believe, even though we are now at a unique point in our history in this country where there's a great deal of high sensitivity on policing and race, that this might help to clarify, letting people understand that history, where we've evolved, and why it's so important to embrace our past, but to talk about where we're going in the future. So with that said, I'd love for the executive director and his staff to at least look at creating what it would take to create a standardized, mandatory module on the history of policing, so that all officers are taught, at least at minimum, in the academy. And I actually think over time it should matriculate into officers getting into higher ranks, so that there is that clarity and that common understanding of the past and where we're going in the future. And I think that they should come back and help us understand what the impacts of creating it would be, as well as any fiscal impacts, at least for discussion, so that we can have a cogent discussion about its benefits. So with that, I thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you, Commissioner Ewell. Your request is especially timely after yesterday's anniversary of the Oklahoma massacre, and the number of people that commented that those who were in school in Oklahoma during that time, after that time, never learned about the massacre. And so I think history is important for all of the reasons that you've articulated, as well as your friend who you had dinner with the other night. And I appreciate you wanting to put this on the agenda, and I'm sure it will be. Thank you, Commissioner Lamont. Any other comments?
Madam Chair,
Yes, please.
this is Commissioner Moore. I would guess, don't want to guess, but I would say, is the gentleman commissioner referring to going back to Sir Robert Peel's 9 principles of policing, or is there a point of reference before that time?
I don't want to suggest, where, but, as I've read history, Commissioner, what I've found is there are 2 points in time that are highlighted most often, and I can't authenticate it. I'm just reading what historians have pointed out. And that was in the early 1800s when we borrowed the model from Europe, and but we were hiring others to protect their goods and services, and that was mainly in the North. In the South, they were hiring slave patrols, and that was again in the early 1800s. But both were working together to capture slaves who dared to get away from slavery and to find freedom. And in the North, they were sending them back. And so from there, though, in the early 1800s is when they actually decided that communities would be responsible for financing policing. And I think that happened somewhere in the 1830s as I read through some of the history. And so I'd at least like to start there. But if there are other points in times where it started, and I'm wrong in my reading, where it started as a public entity, that to me would be the place to start.
Thank you. Commissioner Moore, did you want to say anything else about that?
Well, just that I would just recommend to Commissioner L to a good starting point would be at Robert Peel's 9 principles of policing, where the police are the community are the police. And the only difference between the two is that the police in uniform get paid for what they do. It brings back the whole principle of community policing in my estimation. So there's 9 principles in which the police departments over in England were started. And when it comes to America, then you see the switch as it goes into what he refers to as correctly as the slave patrol. So I would just recommend he take a look at, again, Robert Peel's 9 principles of policing.
Thank you so much.
I am writing it down as you speak.
Commissioner Brazil, did you have something to say?
If we're done with that one, I just wanted to add. So at the request of Commissioner Ramirez, and we added SLI dispatch supervisors the ability, but we also have some other supervisors within particularly sheriff's offices that have custody staff that are not post to discuss allowing custody supervisors the ability to go to SLI.
Thank you. Anything else? Anything else anybody else would like to add to the agenda? Okay, anything else, Commissioner? Chair, Executive Director?
No, thank you. I have those two items, and please email me with anything else that you have to add. I think we covered about 5 to 6 agenda items last time. And then whatever due outs we have from that, we'll take after September based on what's said. So please email them to me if you would like, and we'll take them from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Policy A9 dictates an executive committee of the commission is to conduct a performance evaluation of the executive director on an annual or biennial basis. Additionally, post policy A9 dictates the executive committee is to consist of the chair, vice chair, past chair, and 1 at-large member, 4 total. If the past chair is not available, another at-large member may be chosen. Executive Director Alvarez's last performance evaluation was conducted on May 30th, 2019. Therefore, we need to conduct this performance evaluation in 2021. I currently serve as the chair, and Commissioner Brazil currently serves as the vice chair, and thus the 2 of us should serve on the executive committee. The past chair is not available. Therefore, we'll need to select 2 at-large members. Are there any nominations or volunteers to serve as the at-large members? You could raise your hand so I could see you. Commissioner Long, are you putting your hand on your face or raising it?
He's muted.
It was a yes. Can I get one more person? Who's that? O'Rourke. Fabulous. Okay, now we have 4.
Madam Chair, if I may, I don't think you're allowed to, I think there's an exemption for another 2 years if there are not sufficient volunteers. So actually, I think this is rolled to 2023.
And I think you're wrong.
I do reward his creativity, though. That was good.
I do too. I always, he's awesome. Okay, so we took care of that. We named 2 people and they're fabulous. Ms. Nunez, what am I asking you to do a roll call vote on now? I guess we just have motions. Is there a motion to approve Commissioner Long as the first at-large member?
I make the motion to move
Thank you.
Commissioner Long.
Second? Louis, thank you. Okay, Ms. Nunez, please do a roll call.
We're almost done. Barcelona,
Yes.
Braun,
Yes.
Brazil,
Yes.
Louis,
Yes.
Donilon,
Yes.
Doyle,
Yes.
Dudley,
Yes.
Yule, Yule,
Yes. Yes, I'm sorry. I was muted.
Long, McMahon, Marsh, Moore,
Yes.
O'Rourke,
Yes.
Ramirez. Thank you.
Thank you. That motion passes. Is there a motion to approve Commissioner O'Rourke as the second at-large member?
Commissioner Donlin.
Thank you.
Moore second.
Thank you. Ms. Nunez, please do a roll call.
Barcelona,
Yes.
Braun, Braun,
Yes.
Brazil,
Yes.
Louis,
Yes.
Donilon,
Yes.
Doyle,
Yes.
Yes.
Yule,
Yes.
Long, McMahon, Moore,
Yes.
O'Rourke, Ramirez. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so secondly, if the commission concurs, the appropriate action would be to approve the date and time for the executive director's performance evaluation. Post staff have recommended the evaluation be conducted at 10 a.m. on September 1st, 2021. simply because we'll be holding a commission meeting that same day, starting at 1. So is there a motion to approve a date and time? That date and time.
Motion Bowie.
Is there a second? And any questions or comments? Ms. Nunez, please take a roll call.
Barcelona,
Yes.
Braun,
Yes.
Brazil,
Yes.
Bowie,
Yes.
Donaldin,
Yes.
Doyle,
Yes.
Dudley,
Yes.
Yule,
Yes.
Long, McMahon, Marsh, Moore,
Yes.
O'Rourke,
Yes.
Ramirez. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now future commission dates. That motion passes. Future commission dates, September 1, 2021. It posts Pasadena, California. Do we know where we're staying yet? No, we don't even know if it's going to be happening yet, but we all think it will happen. We may have to do a combination of Zoom, depends on what's going on. But at the moment, we're headed to Pasadena. December 8th through 9th, post West Sacramento. March 2nd and 3rd, TBD. May 25th through 26th, post in West Sacramento. As to a closed session, we will not be holding closed session during this meeting. Commissioners, is there anything else? Yes.
The need for a potential hearing in October, do you have any better sense of that? That's all just going to depend on the bills. Is that what you're thinking?
Correct. I think the only bill that gives us pause that is going to make us have to move very, very quickly is SB 2.
Yeah.
And we'll know once that comes into play. The others do not cause us too much concern. I mean, they cause us concern in implementing, right? But not cause us concern in terms of creating new regulation on processes and policy.
So you would see an October meeting though as a fairly quick endeavor to, it would focus primarily on approving regulations. Is that what you'd see? Or would you create a whole agenda? Just curious.
No, I think it would be somewhat of a shorter meeting, but however, for the staff to create the policies and procedures to implement SB2, as Megan put, a 33-page bill, is going to be a mountain of work for the staff. And if I may also, Madam Chair, once the executive order expires and the state of emergency expires, we are not in a position or permitted to do online meetings that will have to be done in person. As we know, via Bagley-Keene or pursuant to Bagley-Keene, should we do online participation, we have to publicize the actual nodes where people are logging in from and make them available to the public. So there are some bills that are moving through the legislature because I think the online platform has given more ability for individuals to participate online at some of these meetings. But for now, the meeting will be in person in Pasadena. We do have tentatively a hotel, right? I mean, I can't remember if it's like the Wyndham or something. Westin in Pasadena. We do anticipate having a little bit longer meeting in terms of having a chief do the welcoming remarks. We had a chief that committed to doing it in Pasadena previously, as well as an guard, so we can get back to normal formalities of the commission meetings. And Katie and Carrie are working feverishly to try to find a location. March 2nd and 3rd of next year. We are looking to try to do it somewhere in the Bay Area, just because we have not, but they're having a hard time finding a hotel at $95 a night.
Anything else? Anything else from anyone? Wonderful. Yes. Someone's pointing. Someone's. Oh, sorry. Is there anything else from anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. Be safe. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.